Chapter 10:10. Chuli spat out a mouthful of blood in the air. The bitterness was indescribable. They were wearing soul-suppressing jades. This god-suppressing jade could restrain the Tian Luo sect's antique art. His mentality was strong, and the stupefying howl was powerful enough, but he could not break through the protection of the god-suppressing jade. There was no invincible martial art in the world. Every martial art had a way to counter it. For example, the flying knife could be countered by treasured armor, and the god-stunning howl could be countered by the god-suppressing jade. However, the god-suppressing jade was extremely precious. It was even rarer and more precious than treasured armor. Not only did the two gods' stupefying howl not gain any advantage, but he also suffered a great loss. The two white tiger killing skills were the power that they had deliberately condensed, so their power was twice as strong as the previous one, causing him to suffer a rather heavy injury. Bam, bam, bam. 4 tiger silhouettes formed from the white tiger killing skill were extremely agile. They went around the trees and crashed into Chuli. Chuli did not manage to avoid it completely and was sent flying again. The two elders had already used their secret techniques. The white tiger's silhouette's speed was extraordinarily fast, and its power was astonishing. After taking a few hits, his tendons and bones were injured, affecting his circulation. His 5 viscera and 6 bowels were in severe pain. He almost couldn't help but want to use God's feet, but he didn't dare to do so. He gritted his teeth and activated the secret technique of Great Light. His speed suddenly increased, but he still could not shake off the 4 elders. He had no choice but to head toward the peak of the mountain. The mountain was tall and majestic. In the blink of an eye, the 5 of them arrived at the peak of the mountain and arrived at a steep cliff. At the bottom of the cliff was a deep valley. At first glance, he could only see the vast white fog. Even with his eyesight, he couldn't see the bottom of the valley. At this moment, he was standing on a rock at the top of the mountain, sneering at the 4 of them. The 4 elders fanned out and slowly approached him. Chuli scoffed. "You're ruthless enough to send 4 hidden masters to kill me. You've learned something that you shouldn't have." An old beggar said in a deep voice, "How dare you secretly learn the martial arts of the White Tiger sect?" Chuli replied, "The martial arts of the White Tiger sect aren't that great anyway. What's the big deal about learning it? The White Tiger power is the foundation of our White Tiger sect. You're courting death if you want to learn it." The old beggar was unkempt and dirty, so no one could see his true face. He shook his head and said, "Isn't your saintess more capable than you? Why didn't they covet our White Tiger power?" Chuli shook his head. "The saint is too lazy to learn in secret." "Humph. That's because Sun Mingwen knows that if she stealthily learns our White Tiger power, the two sects will fight to the death." The old beggar scoffed. "The Holy Church of Light may be powerful, but the White Tiger sect isn't to be trifled with. Come on, you guys." Chuli curled his lips and said, "Look at what you've done with the White Tiger power." His words caused the expressions of the other 4 to change slightly. They had also noticed the peculiarity of Chuli's White Tiger power. Although it was not pure enough, its power was extraordinary. More importantly, he had only cultivated for a few days, yet he was already so powerful. It was obvious that he was on the right path. This was what the White Tiger sect had been pursuing all this while. "Zhao, have you comprehended the White Tiger power?" the old beggar asked in a deep voice. Chuli said, "What's so difficult about it? It's a piece of cake for me. Are you willing to join the White Tiger sect?" The old beggar scoffed. "We'll grant you the position of an elder. It'll be much better than being in the Holy Church of Light. You're in an awkward situation in the Holy Church of Light. The saint doesn't like you, and the disciples don't accept you. You're all alone. However, if you join the White Tiger sect, you won't be like this. The sect leader will value you greatly. There's no need for that." Chuli shook his head. "If I join the White Tiger sect, you won't be able to protect me. The Holy Church of Light will never let a traitor go. You can live in seclusion on our mountain," the old beggar said. "No matter how powerful the Holy Church of Light is, they won't be able to break into White Tiger Peak. Staying on White Tiger Peak is worse than death." Chuli shook his head. I don't want to live in seclusion. Then you'll die today? The old beggar said coldly. Chu Li smiled. So what if I die? You guys don't have the ability. Fine. The old beggar scoffed. Since you're so loyal to the Holy Church of Light, you shall die. The four of them placed their hands on the shoulders of the people next to them and pushed with their other hands. Four palm energies converged in the air and formed a vast wave of energy that surged toward Chu Li. There was no way to avoid it. Bang! Chu Li was like a ball that was hit. In the blink of an eye, he was shot out of the mountain and fell into the unfathomable valley. Chu Li did not expect their final attack to be so powerful. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood as he was severely injured. With so many injuries stacked on top of each other, even if his body was made of steel, he would not be able to withstand it. His vision darkened as he fell. The four of them flew out and fell with him. In the air, they formed four white tiger silhouettes and shot them at Chu Li. This time, there were no more obstacles. Chu Li's vision darkened. Although he knew he had to dodge, he did not have the strength. Bang, 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 bang. The tiger silhouettes hit him. If it were not for the floating silkworm treasure clothing, he would have been killed. Even with the floating silkworm treasure clothing, he was still seriously injured. There were several times when he wanted to use God's limbs, but he could not because they were behind him. He could only desperately activate the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture. Their inner energy was too pure, so the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture's conversion was slow. If the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture's mastery was higher, their inner energy would not be able to harm him. Unfortunately, his understanding of the Scripture was not deep enough, so he could only convert a little. Bang, 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 bang. They kept hitting Chu Li, hoping to kill him in one go. Chu Li had no choice but to activate the life and death Scripture, allowing endless spiritual energy to flow into his body to nourish his body and heal his injuries. Otherwise, he would really be beaten to death. He suddenly turned around and faced the sky, waving his hands. Chi blades shot out one after another. The four of them panicked. They were too close to Chu Li and had been thinking about how to kill him, but they did not expect him to counterattack. TSS, 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 TSS. Chu Li's energy blades seemed endless as they kept shooting out, forcing them to use their fists to block the energy blades. Bang! Chu Li fell into a deep pond, then quickly emerged from the water and went into the forest next to it. Bang, 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 bang. The four elders also fell into the deep pond. When they emerged from the water, Chu Li had already disappeared. Chase him. He must have gone into the forest. The four of them entered the forest again. Their tracking skills were very good. For the next 2 days, Chu Li desperately fled toward the Great Light Peak under their pursuit. The four of them knew that once Chu Li reached the Great Light Peak, they would not have a chance to chase after him anymore. Therefore, they activated their secret skills and beat him until he kept vomiting blood. Chu Li relied on a strong body to persevere and run with all his might. In the evening, when the sun was setting, Chu Li fled into the forest while the four of them chased after him. Chu Li's clothes were tattered, making him look like a beggar. His face was as pale as a sheet, and his breathing was heavy, but his body movement technique was still very fast. The four people behind him were not much better. They were exhausted, and no matter how strong their physical strength was, after 3 days of relentless pursuit, their faces were covered with frost. Chapter 10:11. The four elders behind him stopped abruptly. Their bodies tensed up as they looked at the forest in front of Chu Li with a serious expression. Chu Li laughed out loud. I'm not dead yet." The four elders from White Tiger sect slowly retreated and wanted to leave. Chu Li shouted, "My saint, you're finally here. I'm too early." Sun Mingwei appeared in front of Chu Li in a flash. She was dressed in a white tunic and had a white veil covering her face. She looked as graceful as a fairy and only revealed a pair of almond-shaped eyes as she stared coldly at the four elders from White Tiger sect. The four elders looked serious as they cursed in their hearts. They did not expect Sun Mingwei to personally come. It seemed that the Holy Church of Light still valued Zhao Dea very much. Sun Mingyue was a person who had to deal with numerous affairs every day, yet she had the time to care about a mere branch leader. Chu Li sat on the ground. My saint, if you didn't come over, I would have lost my life. Logically speaking, I should have come out before you were about to die, Sun Mingyue said coldly. I'll teach you a lesson. Now I know. Chu Li waved his hand. These people from White Tiger's sect are very powerful. I can't afford to offend them. It's good that you know. Sun Mingyue scoffed and looked up at the four elders who were slowly retreating. 4 hidden masters came to kill a branch leader. What is the White Tiger sect trying to do? He killed junior brother Zheng. We have to avenge him. One of the old beggars scoffed. A life and death battle only involves oneself and no one else, Sun Mingyue said coldly. Is the White Tiger sect going to break this rule? This young man is too despicable. We must kill him, the old beggar said. Sun Mingyue shook her head. You've broken the rule. Don't blame me for being ruthless. She didn't give the 4 of them a chance to speak before lightly striking out with her fist. It was soundless and light, and her jade-white fist seemed like a piece of white jade that had been smeared with rouge under the setting sun, and it emitted a moving brilliance. The 4 elders looked as if they were facing a formidable enemy. They put their hands on each other's shoulders again and pushed their palms out together. Bang! There was a loud sound. The 4 old men were sent flying. Sun Mingyue stood there motionlessly with one hand clasped behind her back. She looked at them indifferently, graceful and graceful. The 4 elders spat out blood and used the momentum to escape. Oomph! Sun Mingyue snorted lightly and suddenly disappeared from where she was. She reappeared 100 meters away and stood in front of the 4 old men. Then she lightly threw out 4 punches. Bam! 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 The 4 of them were sent flying again, heading in Chu Li's direction. Chu Li sat on the ground and threw out 4 blades. The 4 of them spat out blood and flew backward with their backs, facing Chu Li. They wanted to turn their heads to look, but their injuries rendered them powerless. The flying blades pierced through their backs and went through their throats without any resistance. The 4 of them fell to the ground, struggling unwillingly. They stretched out their hands to seal their acupoints and took out spirit pills. Chu Li glided over and waved his hand again. The blades of chi shot into their eyes and drilled into their brains, turning into a force that minced their brains. Chu Li let out a long sigh of relief. He laid limply on the ground and remained motionless. He only had the strength to breathe. I've finally killed them. Sun Mingyue appeared in front of him in a flash. She lowered her head and looked at him. You managed to escape from them. I underestimated you. Chu Li said, Saint, you've always underestimated me. Why did they want to kill you? Sun Mingyue asked indifferently. Chu Li sighed helplessly. Because I secretly learned the White Tiger power. He knew that Sun Mingyue could read people's minds. Of course, she could read their thoughts and knew why they wanted to kill him. He told her, without hesitation, to gain her trust. You're quite capable, Sun Mingyue said. You even stole the White Tiger power. She was very satisfied with Chu Li's answer. Chu Li smiled proudly. What's so difficult about it? The key is how I do it. It's a piece of cake for others to think of it. Sun Mingyue shook her head. It was not difficult for those who were capable, but those who were incapable. This matter was extremely difficult, but he said it was insignificant. This was the difference between a person's intelligence and means of doing things. This Zhao Dai was arrogant and unruly, but he was a rare talent. However, the more intelligent a person was, the more they needed to be polished. Otherwise, they would get into big trouble. This time, he almost got into big trouble and lost his life. Fortunately, he was quick-witted and caused a ruckus in Gale City. Sun Mingyue received the news and rushed over. Fortunately, she arrived in time. Otherwise, he would have died. No matter how powerful he was, he would not have been able to fend off the attacks of 4 hidden masters. If Sun Mingyue was one step late, she might have had to collect his corpse. For so many years, the Holy Church of Light had been trying to understand the martial arts of the other 3 sections. However, because it was an inheritance through enlightenment, it was almost impossible for it to be passed on to outsiders. Outsiders could not obtain it either. An inheritance through enlightenment could not be restored with pen and paper because its essence could never be understood. It was like a dream. Once you tried to recall it, you would have a vague impression, but when you actually said it, it would be a blur. Chu Li was able to obtain a complete inheritance. This was something that could only be encountered by chance. How did you get it? Sun Minghua asked. Chu Li told her what happened. Sun Minghua frowned. You only got the incantation, but you didn't get the essence. Chu Li said, actually, it was enough to get the incantation. Their visualization was wrong, so it was better for them to visualize it themselves. They imagined a tiger as a cat. How dare they? I've seen a tiger before. People say that a spirit tiger is 10 times more powerful than a normal tiger, so I visualized it as 10 times more powerful. Sun Minghua pondered. Can the white tiger power be cultivated this way? It's much more powerful than theirs. Chu Li curled his lips. The white tiger power that they cultivated has no power at all. You talk big. Sun Minghua shook her head. You should heal your injuries first. Chu Li took out a jade bottle from his inner pocket, poured out 2 pills, and popped them into his mouth. Sun Minghua said, I heard that you've refined a lot of light pills. Chu Li nodded. Sun Minghua scoffed and did not say anything else. She became angry at the mention of this. Chu Li's talent in alchemy was too shocking, but he did not refine pills. It was a reckless waste of resources. She went behind Chu Li and sat down gracefully. She did not care about the dirt on the ground that had dirted her white shirt. Instead, she placed her palm on his back. Chu Li knew what she was trying to do. She was treating his injuries and taking the opportunity to observe his cultivation level and the condition of his injuries. Fortunately, apart from the life and death scripture, he did not use any of Chu Li's skills this time. He only used Zhao Dai's strength, so he was severely injured. Sun Minghua's inner energy was extremely pure. Her energy, which was as cool as water, seeped into his body and rapidly helped him heal his injuries and repair his body. Time passed slowly and silently. When dusk arrived, Sun Minghua slowly withdrew her palm and looked at the back of Chu Li's head that was steaming. She sighed softly. Chu Li's cultivation level had almost recovered. The inner energy of the white tiger power in his body was indeed powerful. After a while, Chu Li opened his eyes and let out a long sigh. A puff of white air shot out like an arrow. Sun Minghua said, Your injuries need some time to heal. Go back to the Great Light Peak. Chu Li nodded. I want to go back to the Spirit Medicine Nursery. Go, Sun Minghua said. He stood up and went back to the Great Light Peak with Sun Minghua. Chapter 10-12. P.S. Update complete. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Sun Minghua frowned. Why? She was the one who commanded the troops and disliked interference the most. Mo Qianjun has a grudge against me. He'll vent his anger on them, Chu Li said. Moreover, falling Autumn City is too dangerous for them. Once Xishan appears, they won't be able to fight back. Someone will deal with Monk Xishan, Sun Minghua said. Chu Li shook his head. The person you sent to deal with Monk Xishan might not be able to find him. He's very cunning. Falling Autumn City is short of manpower. Most patrols have gone there. Sun Minghua shook her head. Moreover, I don't believe that Altar Leader Mo will use his position to avenge his personal grudge. After all, you're his only enemy. You don't know Mo Qianjun well, do you? Chu Li scoffed. He looks heroic, but he's narrow-minded. He'll definitely take revenge on Senior Sister Li. He won't hurt her no matter what, Sun Minghua said. That might not be the case, Chu Li said. Sun Minghua cast a sidelong glance at him, revealing an impatient expression. Chu Li knew that it would be counterproductive if he said anything else. He scoffed and stopped talking. Since he had already sent his men, it was useless to say anything else. The two returned to Great Light Peak. Chu Li went to the Spirit Medicine Nursery to heal, while Sun Minghua returned to Divine Light Basilica. In the early morning, Chu Li was sitting in his small house to heal when someone knocked on his door. Chu Li said, Come in. GXan strode in with red eyes. Junior brother Zhao. Chu Li noticed that something was wrong. What happened? Junior Sister Li. Junior Sister Li entered great light surpassing state. Exine almost choked. Impossible. Chu Li frowned. Are you saying that Senior Sister Li is dead? Yes, she entered great light surpassing state with Senior Sister Lu. GXN gritted his teeth and nodded slowly. Chu Li shook his head. Don't joke around, GXIN said. Junior brother Zhao, do you think I would joke about this? Chu Li's face darkened. Impossible. He knew that people in the martial arts world danced with death, but his good friends never died. He had spirit pills and the eclipse purloin technique. That was why he had never experienced the death of his friends. He felt that Li Ruolin's trip was ominous, but he had already made ample preparations. He had given them the jade pendant and planned to unleash his god's limbs at the risk of exposing himself to save their lives at the critical moment. They still had the light pill with them. If they ate one before the battle, they wouldn't die no matter how heavy their injuries were, unless their heads were directly chopped off. However, as long as they weren't afraid of being injured, they could trade injuries for injuries, and it was almost impossible for them to be beheaded. Logically speaking, he should have been absolutely safe with these methods, but he still died. Who killed him? Monk Zhishan. GXN gritted his teeth. Chu Li gritted his teeth. Zhishan, utmost kindness. GXIN's eyes reddened as he took a deep breath and said, I'm useless, and I can't avenge Junior Sister Li. I can only rely on you, Junior Brother Zhao. You must kill Baldy Zhishan, or Junior Sister Li won't be able to rest in peace. Chu Li asked, have they really entered great light surpassing state? They activated the secret technique of great light and eventually transformed into a beam of light that entered the great light surpassing state. GXIN nodded slowly. This comforted him. For those who cultivated the great light scripture, it was all for this final step to be able to step into the great light surpassing state and escape the cycle of reincarnation. Once they entered the surpassing state, they would continue to cultivate, and there would still be a chance for them to survive. Chu Li's face darkened, and he did not say a word. Who knew what was going on in the great light surpassing state? However, to this world, Li Ruolin and Lu Zhan were already dead. He had been trying to accept this piece of news, but he always felt that it was unreal. It was as if GXIN was just joking and would soon tell him that Junior Sister Li was still alive because someone else had made a mistake. After a while, he said in a deep voice, they met Monk Zhishan before they even reached Falling Autumn City. They died in Falling Autumn City. GXIN shook his head. Chu Li asked, the strength of Falling Autumn City hasn't increased. The Holy Church has already sent out Law King Fong Qingyang. GXIN scoffed. However, I heard that the priest couldn't make it in time and got entangled. By the time the priest arrived, Junior Sister Li and Junior Sister Lu had already ascended into the sky. Chu Li gritted his teeth, stood up, and walked out. Junior Brother Zhao. GXIN immediately called out. Chu Li turned to look at him. GXIN asked, Junior Brother Zhao, where are you going? I'm going to look for the saint. Chu Li said coldly. Why? GXIN quickly asked. Find out what exactly happened. Chu Li said coldly. GXIN said, when Junior Sister Li was alive, she was afraid that you'd cause trouble. She told me several times that if she's not around, I'd advise you to act calmly and not be emotional. Chu Li sneered. Can I find out how Senior Sister Li died? The saint isn't in a good mood either, GXIN said. It's not wise to look for her now. Chu Li scoffed. I'm in a worse mood. After he said that, he turned around and strode out. He was extremely fast. Along the way, he bumped into a few disciples who entered the mountain with him. They greeted him, but he ignored them and went straight to Divine Light Basilica with a gloomy face. Outside Divine Light Basilica, a few middle-aged men stood at the bottom of the steps. They were silent, and the atmosphere was depressing. When they saw Chu Li, they ignored him and continued to stare at the basilica. Chu Li did not barge in directly, but waited outside. A moment later, the girl in green fluttered out. Altar Leader Jing, please come in. A middle-aged man slowly walked up the steps and entered Divine Light Basilica, disappearing before their eyes. Chu Li quickly said, Senior Sister, I want to see the saint. The girl in green glanced at him. Junior brother Zhao, let's do it another day. It's about senior sister Li and senior sister Lu. Chu said. The girl in green said the saint has summoned a few altar leaders and priests to talk about this. Junior brother Zhao, don't be anxious. Go back and wait. Li shook his head. I can't wait. I want to know how senior sister Li and senior sister Lu died. The girl in green frowned at him and sighed. The saint is investigating. The details are not clear yet, but senior sister Li and senior sister Lu won't die in vain. Li remained silent for a while before he gave a fist salute. Then he turned around and went down Great Light Peak to falling Autumn City. Even at this time of grief and indignation, he did not use God's limbs. Instead, he desperately urged his light body technique to rush to falling Autumn City. He wanted to find out how the two women died and avenge them. This was the mystery of the heavenly demonic power. The more emotional he was, the more he could break away from his original identity and completely transform into the person he was today. He did not sleep or rest for 2 days and arrived at falling Autumn City in the evening. Under the setting sun, falling Autumn City looked bleak and shabby. Li entered the city silently, but did not go to the town defense prefecture. In a small courtyard, Baifeng lazily reclined on a low couch. Her right arm was bandaged, and her aura was unstable. Her injuries were serious. Baifeng was not surprised to see Li appear silently in her courtyard. Instead, she sighed. You're here. I want to know how senior sister Li and senior sister Lu died. Li gave a fist salute and asked, Senior Bai, do you know? Baifeng nodded. I do. Li said, please tell me in detail. Chapter 10:13. Li asked, Monk Shan is here again. This time it's not just Monk Shan. There are also experts from Haizong Mountain and Royal Blade Palace. We were caught off guard. Miss Li and Miss Lu used their secret skills to sacrifice themselves to kill the enemies. That's why we were able to stabilize ourselves and not be defeated in the end. Baifeng sighed. If they hadn't risked their lives to fight for their lives, I'm afraid falling Autumn City would have fallen into the hands of the Qiu dynasty. Why are they the ones risking their lives? Li asked. Isn't it someone else? The two of them were on duty that night, Baifeng said with a frown. So they felt that they had the most responsibility, right? Where's altar leader Mo? What did he say? Li scoffed. Baifeng said. As for him, he didn't say much. He only said that the two women were dozing off and that they had messed up the important matter and harmed everyone. Seeing that Chu Li's face had darkened, she hurriedly advised. As an altar leader, it's inevitable for him to vent his anger on others. She knew Chu Li's temper very well. Once he was angry, he would not care about anything and would do anything. For all she knew, he might even cause trouble for Mo Qianjun. Mo Qianjun's martial arts were very powerful, and he would not be able to deal with him. Moreover, the Holy Church of Light also had its own rules that forbade them from killing each other. Otherwise, they would be punished according to the church rules. The lightest punishment would be the crippling of their martial arts and expelling them from the church, while the most severe punishment would be death. Chu Li said coldly. Mo Qianjun has always regarded them as a thorn in his side. He's clearly trying to provoke them into risking their lives. He deserves to die. Not really, Baifeng said. Although Mo Qianjun doesn't have a big heart, he's still reliable at crucial times. He wouldn't do something that would cost him his own life. That's because you don't know what kind of person he is, Senior Bai. Li gritted his teeth. I'll interrogate him properly. Baifeng said, Young Zhao, don't let your emotions affect your decisions. Mo Qianjun's status is higher than yours, and his martial arts are stronger than yours. You won't have a good ending if you go against him. In the end, you'll definitely be the one who suffers. Li nodded slowly. I know. I'll take my leave first. Thank you, Senior White. Baifeng sighed and said, Don't let your emotions affect your decisions. Take care of yourself first. Of course. Li forced a smile. Murderous intent surged in his heart. Through Baifeng's mind, he saw the situation at that time. More than 10 martial arts masters were facing off against Monk Shan, a sword-wielding master and a saber-wielding master. They were all young martial arts masters, but their martial arts were so powerful that they could not fight back at all. Monk Ji Shan interfered and used the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture to prevent them from working together. The other two young martial arts masters were not inferior to him either, so they were eventually defeated one by one. The Tian Luo sect lost another martial arts master, the White Tiger sect lost another one, and the Holy Church of Light lost two. If it wasn't for Mo Qianjuan's criticism, the two women wouldn't have been the ones to lose their lives. Mo Qianjun was cultivating in his own courtyard. The late autumn flowers and leaves had already fallen to the ground, drifting down from time to time, slowly landing on the ground. He moved his palms slowly, and the broken branches and withered leaves on the ground rolled along with his palms. Suddenly, there was a flash, and Chu Li appeared. Mo Qianjun glanced at him. His palms didn't stop as he said indifferently, "You're here. Mo Qianjun, you're the one who killed senior sister Li and senior sister Lu." Chu Li said coldly. Mo Qianjun chuckled, shook his head, and said, "You're too unreliable. You know it." Chu Li scoffed. "I'll report you to the saint and confront her face to face. I'll let the saint see your sinister thoughts and see if you're worthy of being an altar leader." Mo Qianjun said indifferently, "I can't get away from this. Do you think the saint will transfer me back just because of what you said? You're dreaming." Chu Li laughed coldly. "I'll tell the saint that you colluded with the enemy and colluded with the Qiu dynasty to harm the church's disciples. That's why Falling Autumn City is in danger. Do you think the saint will summon you back to question you?" Chu Li wanted to kill Mo Qianjun, but he wouldn't kill him like this. It was the same as killing someone, but the person who made the first move was different. If Mo Qianjun killed him first, Chu Li would be able to avoid the punishment of beheading. As for other punishments, such as being crippled of his martial arts, those were trivial. Chu Li would rather have his martial arts crippled than to kill Mo Qianjun and avenge Li Ruolin and Lu Jun. Mo Qianjun's expression remained unchanged as he smiled. "Do you think the saint will believe your nonsense? If it's that easy to summon an altar leader back, the Holy Church would have been in chaos. You should just give up." Chu Li's heart trembled. This was a vicious move. Although it was a false accusation, it was troublesome. Chu Li said, "The saint won't believe it if someone else says it. But I'm different. Let's take a gamble and see if the saint will believe it. As long as I stand in front of the saint, Mo Qianjun, your evil intentions will be exposed." "I don't have any evil intentions," Mo Qianjun said indifferently. "It's just a normal reprimand. You, on the other hand, are abandoning righteousness because of your personal feelings. Do you know how critical the situation is now? If anything happens to me, Falling Autumn City will fall immediately." Chu Li smiled faintly. "You think too highly of yourself. If Falling Autumn City falls, you'll be guilty." Mo Qianjun glared at him coldly. Chu Li said, "With the priest here, an altar leader like you is nothing. The priest has just arrived, so he can't keep the situation under control." Mo Qianjun said, "For the time being, I can't command him like my own arm, which will give him an opportunity. I advise you to find another time to deal with me." Chu Li said indifferently, "I'll return to Great Light Peak immediately and report to the saint." Chu Li turned around and left. His shackles in the Holy Church of Light were Li Ruolin, Song Yuya, and Sun Lihua. He could not be bothered with the lives of the others. Once Li Ruolin was dead, he no longer had any scruples about the Holy Church of Light. He had completely cast aside his shackles and became a true enemy. He did not care if Falling Autumn City would fall into the hands of the Qiu dynasty. The more intense the battle between the Li dynasty and the Qiu dynasty, the better. It would be best if both sides perished together. Mo Qianjun hurriedly said, "Wait." However, Chu Li did not care at all. In a flash, he left the courtyard and flew into another courtyard. Fang Qingyang, who was dressed in a green tunic, was leisurely practicing his swordsmanship. When he saw Chu Li suddenly appear, he frowned and stopped practicing. Chu Li fist saluted. "Greetings, Method King. You're Zhao Jiang, huh?" Fang Qingyang sized him up and nodded. Why are you here? He had heard of Zhao Jianghe's name. He was a genius among geniuses who was favored by the saint. He would become a priest in the future, but unfortunately, he had a bad temper and needed to be honed. When he saw Zhao Jianghe's gloomy expression and murderous aura around him, he knew that his cultivation level was extraordinary. Fang Qingyang sighed to himself. He had cultivated for less than a year, but he was a genius. It was no wonder he was favored by the saint. Chu Li said, "Altar leader Mo has a grudge against me. Because senior sister Li and senior sister Lu were close to me, he vented his anger on them. He deliberately harmed them and caused their deaths. Do you have any evidence for this?" Fang Qingyang's expression darkened. "This is a serious crime," Chu Li said. "As long as he stands in front of the saint, he won't be able to hide from her." Fang Qingyang frowned. "This is a crucial time, so it's not a good time to cause trouble. However, if what you said is true, he won't be able to hide it from a saint. You don't have to worry, but don't go out and spread the news." Chu Li said, "I confronted altar leader Mo just now. He's already determined to kill me and will definitely assassinate me. If anything happens to me, it'll be Mo Qianjuan's doing. Don't talk nonsense. Altar leader Mo won't do that." Fang Qingyang shook his head. Chapter 10:14. He fluttered out of falling autumn city. Dusk was rising and the light was dim. He glided through the forest and climbed up a tall mountain. Suddenly, he stopped and turned to look at the forest below. "Come out." Mo Qianjun emerged from the forest and stepped on the treetops to approach him. He said, "Zhao Dai, I wanted to keep you alive for a few more days and find a chance to kill you in the future. Unfortunately, you're courting death. Today will be the day you die." Truly looked pleased. "I've already told Fang Wang that if I die, it'll be because of you, Mo Qianjun." Mo Qianjun laughed disapprovingly. "How naive. Do you think I'm the one who did it just because you say so? It depends on the wound and the martial art that injured you. Don't worry, they'll only see the sword technique of the Ocean Sword faction." He slowly pulled out the long sword from his waist and suddenly stabbed it. Swoosh! The sword moved as fast as lightning. The sword seemed to have traveled across space. When the sword was thrust, the tip was already in front of Chu Li's throat. There was no time for him to dodge or react. However, Chu Li had already sensed his killing intent and easily dodged the sword. "You're far from the Ocean Sword faction's sword technique. Why are you so secretive about killing a person? How petty. Zhao Dai, don't need to hide to kill you. I'm going to kill you." He swung his arm and a cold glint flashed. Mo Qianjun blocked it with his sword and hid behind it like a monkey, using it as a shield. His body movement technique was strange. When he shrank, it felt like he had completely shrunk into the sword. It was as if he could really be covered by the sword. Ding! The flying blade flew into the air and was blocked by the sword. Before Mo Qianjun could rejoice, another blade shot out. Once again, he hid behind the sword and blocked it with his sword. The Ocean Sword faction's sword technique was exquisite. They had a sword technique that specialized in breaking hidden weapons. In order to kill Chu Li, Mo Qianjun had specially practiced this sword technique to break hidden weapons. Coupled with the treasured armor, it seemed like the effect was quite good. Chu Li did not believe it. He kept throwing blade after blade at Mo Qianjun's throat and face. This made things much easier for Mo Qianjun. As long as he protected his throat and face, he could block several flying blades in the blink of an eye. The blades that were aimed at his body could not penetrate his treasured armor. Chu Li got closer and closer. At first, he used flying blades, but later, he switched to energy blades. Both of them were countered by this sword technique. Although his swordsmanship was successful, Mo Qianjun groaned in his heart. He did not expect Chu Li to be so strong. His hand that was holding the sword was already numb, and he could not take more than a few slashes. He pretended to be fine, but unfortunately, he could not fool Chu Li. Chu Li also knew that Mo Qianjun was preparing an ultimate move to turn the tables. After throwing the blade, Chu Li suddenly retreated. Woo! Like a ferocious tiger's roar, Mo Qianjun suddenly switched from defense to offense and thrust his sword forward. This sword was as fast as lightning, and the tip of the sword was so bright that it was impossible to dodge. Unfortunately, Chu Li knew about it in advance and dodged it easily. The force on the sword surged like a huge wave. Once it reached its target, it would unreservedly pour into the injured person's body. At this moment, however, the sword pierced through thin air, and the surging force immediately attacked the person wielding the sword. Mo Qianjun froze. Chu Li opened his mouth and let out a long howl, activating the stupefying howl. Mo Qianjun had already used up all his strength, but he had yet to generate any new strength. His movements were already sluggish, and he was caught off guard by the stupefying roar, so he immediately became sluggish again. TSS. TSS. Two cold glints shot through Mo Qianjun's throat and sent him flying. Chu Li had used all his strength to launch these two blades. Not only were they extremely fast, but they were also extraordinarily powerful. The force on the blades sent Mo Qianjun flying. Mo Qianjun let go, and the long sword fell to the ground. He opened his mouth wide in the air, desperately trying to breathe, but there was a hissing sound coming from his throat. Blood gushed out, and all his strength was draining away. By the time he landed on the ground, he could not muster any strength at all. Chu Li reached out his hand, and Mo Qianjun's long sword that had fallen to the ground flew into his hand. With a fierce swing, Mo Qianjun's head flew into the air. "Spare his life!" A shout came from afar. Fang Qingyang arrived like a wisp of smoke, but unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, Mo Qianjun's head had already rolled to the ground. "You!" Fang Qingyang pointed at Chu Li. He had originally wanted to save Chu Li, but he did not want such a genius disciple to die. As a priest, he had already ascended to the highest position, and no matter how hard he worked, he would not be able to rise any higher. Therefore, he was not jealous of a genius disciple like Chu Li. Instead, he took care of him, as he would be a great help if he could become a priest in the future. He had never expected to see such a scene. Chu Li had beheaded Mo Qianjun with a single swing of his sword. There is a huge gap between their cultivation levels. Chu Li tossed the long sword away and gave a fist salute. "Priest, I'll go to the Great Light Peak to receive my punishment." "You," Fang Qingyang pointed at him. "You shouldn't have killed him. He will be punished according to the sect's rules." "I didn't want to kill him. He wanted to kill me," Chu Li said gravely. "I was going to go back, but he came after me and even pretended to be someone from the vast Ocean Sword sect to kill me. I had no choice but to kill him in order to survive." "You," sigh. Fang Qingyang shook his head and sighed. "Why did you do this? You had a bright future ahead of you, but you ruined it just like that." Chu Li said, "As long as I can avenge Senior Sister Li and Senior Sister Lu, I won't hesitate." Fang Qingyang looked at him. He admired Chu Li's loyalty, but he also pitied him. Chu Li had killed to his heart's content, but his fate had taken a turn for the worse. If he had followed his path, he would have become a branch leader, a patrol, an altar leader, and a priest. He would have grown into an influential figure who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Fang Qingyang. After this sword strike, his fate would be completely different. He would be crippled of his martial arts, and it would be difficult for him to survive. "I'll plead with the saint." Fang Qingyang shook his head. "But no matter what, you've killed a fellow disciple. The sect's rules are merciless, so you must be prepared." "Yes, I'll personally apologize to the saint," Chu Li said gravely and gave a fist salute. "Priest, I'll take my leave." Fang Qingyang nodded slowly. Chu Li turned around and stepped onto a treetop before gliding away. On the morning of the third day, he arrived at the Great Light Peak and the Spirit Medicine Nursery under the bright sun. When he was about to reach his hut, he bumped into Song Yuya. Song Yuya sized him up. "Junior brother Zhao, you don't look well. Go and get some rest." Chu Li shook his head. "Senior sister Song, come with me." Song Yuya looked at him in confusion. Since Chu Li had already turned around and entered his hut, she could only follow him. Chu Li took out 4 jade bottles from the small cupboard on his bed and handed them to Song Yuya. These are the pills I've refined a while ago. Senior sister Song. Take them and use them. What pills? Song Yi asked. A bottle of light pills, 2 bottles of energy cultivation pills, and a bottle of damage control pills, Chu said. Don't tell anyone else. Thank you, junior brother Zhao. Song Yi took the bottles and sized him up. Junior brother Zhao, I've heard about what happened to senior sister Li. Chu smiled. Song Yi said, although senior sister Li has passed away, she did a good deed. It's not a bad thing. Chu nodded. Song Yi knew that her words were not very useful. No matter what, he had passed away forever and they could never meet again. She heard that he liked senior sister Li, but senior sister Li liked senior brother Gxin. You should rest well, Song Yi said. You'll feel better after a while. Chu said, thank you, senior sister Song. I'm going to see the saint. Chapter 10:15. The sun shone brightly. On the peak of Great Light Peak, the crystal-clear ice peaks reflected the red light. The Divine Light Basilica was exceptionally bright. The saint, Sun Mingwei, sat behind a desk. Her face was covered with a white veil, revealing only a pair of almond-shaped eyes. She quietly watched the 4 elders in the basilica. The 4 elders were dressed in white, with white hair and ruddy complexions. They looked like immortals. However, they did not have the transcendent elegance of immortals. Instead, they argued until their faces were flushed and their necks were thick. She watched them argue without saying a word. In my opinion, this unruly fellow should give up and stop indulging him. Otherwise, he'll cause more trouble. He dared to kill an altar leader now. What about the next time? Priest? What about the next time? Could it be the saint? Old who? You're being biased. Why don't you ask why he killed? No matter the reason, he killed someone. Furthermore, he offended his superior and killed an altar lord. Now I'd like to ask, would you kill someone like him if you met him? No. Even if your sweetheart was harmed, you wouldn't kill someone? I believe in the saint and the church's rules. Haha, how fake. Another elder shook his head and sneered. Old who? Have you forgotten what you were like when you were young? Zhao, what do you mean? Old who? You're the same as Zhao De. That's why you hate him so much and want him dead, right? Zhao, don't slander me. When did I want him dead? Cripple his martial arts and throw him into Inyang Cave. How many days do you plan to let him suffer? 10 days. You want him to suffer for 10 days after crippling his martial arts? You might as well give him a quick death. Kill him and save him the pain. Old who? Do you think it's a taboo for him to offend his superiors? The more he lives, the more cowardly he becomes. According to Little Fang's report, Mo Qianjun was the one who hunted Zhao De. Then, Zhao De killed Mo Qianjun. It's true that he killed Mo Qianjun and offended his superiors, but it's not a crime worthy of death. What do you want to do with him? Cripple his martial arts and throw him into Inferno Valley to mine. Then he'll be completely crippled. It's better not to use this little guy. Otherwise, he will become a scourge one day. It's because his sweetheart died. Now that his sweetheart is dead, I don't think any girl will like him, and he won't like any of them either, so there's no need to worry about him going crazy. What a sentimental little fellow. Wang Cheng sighed. Such a sentimental person should be given a chance to live. Then, throw it into Inyang Cave. The crowd discussed among themselves, occasionally looking up at Sun Mingwei. Sun Mingwei seemed to be deep in thought. She did not move, but her eyes flickered. After a while, the 4 old men stopped discussing and looked at Sun Mingwei. Saintess, please make the decision, an old man with white hair and a youthful complexion said in a deep voice. He'll be crippled of his martial arts and sent to Inyang Cave for a month. If he can survive, he'll be sent to Sharp Vigor Battalion. Sun Mingwei said flatly. The old man was a little hesitant. Saintess, isn't a little heavy? A month in Inyang Cave. This was no different from killing him. There had never been anyone who survived a month. If he can't, then it's his fate. Sun Mingwei said faintly. It's up to his fate. Saintess, if he can survive a month, it's no different from killing him. Even if he dies once, he should be absolved of his sins. Why send him to Sharp Vigor Battalion? That's right. Sharp Vigor Battalion has a slim chance of survival. If he's crippled of his martial arts, going to Sharp Vigor Battalion is no different from sending him to death. That's too cruel. Sun Mingyue said faintly. Elder Zhao. Zhao Dai knew he couldn't kill the altar leader, but he still did. He should have expected this. This time, she was completely enraged and had the intention to kill. Young Zhao can't be blamed for this. One was a woman who liked him, and the other was a woman he liked. Both of them died at once. Which man can bear it? It's no wonder he's crazy. No matter how crazy he is, he can't disregard the church's rules. Sun Mingyue said faintly, madness comes with consequences. Sigh. The four elders felt helpless. They were dissatisfied with Chu Li's unscrupulous behavior, but they could understand his madness. Moreover, he was such a talented person, so they could not bear to kill him. However, judging from the saint's stance, she was not going to let Zhao Dai live at all. It's mainly because young Mo took the initiative to kill him. Young Zhao can't be blamed entirely. Elder Zhao, there's no need to say anything more. Zhao Dai was just trying to bait Mo Qianjun into attacking him. Even if Mo Qianjun didn't kill him, he would have killed him. This can't be allowed to continue. What if young Zhao can't make it? If he can't, he can only blame it on fate, Sun Mingyue said faintly. Sigh. I really have nothing to say. Saintess, it's a waste to send him to Sharp Vigor Battalion. Why don't you keep his martial arts and let him kill Monk Zhishan? If he can kill Zhishan, he can make up for his mistakes with his merits. Merits can't make up for mistakes. This is the principle, Sun Mingyue said. Elder Hu, you should understand. The four of them shook their heads helplessly. They had completely understood that the saint wanted to kill Zhao Dai. She was not going to let him live, so it was useless for them to say anything more. Therefore, they fist saluted and left. Sun Mingyue waved her hand and did not try to keep them. When the four of them came out of Divine Light Basilica, they saw Chu Li standing at the bottom of the stairs. Chu Li's ugly appearance was well known in the Great Light Peak. Almost all the disciples of Great Light Peak were outstanding in appearance. Firstly, they had a good foundation from the previous generations. Secondly, the Great Light Scripture also had a beautifying effect. Chu Li was like a chicken among a flock of cranes in Great Light Peak. He was extremely conspicuous and could be recognized at a glance. They looked at Chu Li's serious expression and shook their heads. They still felt that it was a pity. Such a good young man could have been more useful and killed more people for the Holy Church of Light, but he was gone just like that. A young girl in a green shirt glided down the stairs and said, Junior Brother Zhao, come in. Chu Li fist saluted and walked up the stairs step by step. He slowly entered the basilica. Sun Mingyue sat behind the desk and looked at him quietly. Chu Li fist saluted. Greetings, Saintess. You know that you can't escape death, right? Sun Mingyue said. Chu Li replied, I know. You still did it if you knew? Sun Mingyue asked. Yes. Chu Li nodded. Your real enemy isn't altar leader Mo, but Monk Zhishan. Sun Mingyue said, You didn't seek revenge, but killed Mo Qianjun. She shook her head as she spoke. Chu Li said, Monk Zhishan is my mortal enemy, but Mo Qianjun is from the same faction. It's too shameful to die from a fellow faction member's plot. Besides, I can't kill Monk Zhishan. You won't have the chance to seek revenge on Monk Zhishan. Sun Mingyue said, Cripple your martial arts and face the wall in Yinyang Cave for a month. Then, report to the Sharp Vigor Battalion. Chu Li fist saluted without saying a word. Sun Mingyue said, If you can make a great contribution to the Sharp Vigor Battalion and become a centurion, you can regain your position as a branch leader. Yes. Chu Li nodded. The Sharp Vigor Battalion is a camp of sacrificial warriors. They're responsible for spying on the enemy. Yinyang Cave is also a place of death. If you can survive it, consider yourself lucky. If not, it's your fate. Don't blame me, Sun Mingyue said. Chapter 10:16. P.S. Update complete. Sun Mingyue said faintly, Zhao Dai, you'll do it again if there's a next time, right? Even if you know you're going to die? Yes, Chu Li said in a low voice. I can tolerate the strength of my opponents, but I can't tolerate the betrayal of my companions. Saint, don't you know what kind of person Mo Qianjun is? How can someone like him be an altar leader? People change, Yi Zichen said. Sun Mingwei said, Mo Qianjun was heroic and magnanimous back then. He was a rare character, stronger than you are now. Chu Li asked, then how did he become like this? Maybe it's the power of authority. Sun Mingwei said faintly, he can stop his opponents, but he can't stop his obsession with authority. I wanted to give him a chance. Humph, chance. Chu Li curled his lips. Fang Qingyang has gone to replace him. Sun Mingwei said, Zhao Dai, you'll change too. Just like the original Zhao Dai and the current you. Have you changed? Chu Li scoffed. I've never changed. You'll change in the future. I hope you can get through it and come back. Sun Mingwei said. Chu Li said, I'll definitely come back. Sun Mingwei said, I know you have the ability to recover your martial arts, but in Yinyang Cave, the stronger your martial arts, the lower your chances of survival. Chu Li frowned. How is that possible? Nothing is too strange in this world. Sun Mingwei said, what's impossible about it? You can try if you don't believe me. Let's see if you can survive. Chu Li stared at her. Sun Mingwei's eyes were calm like water. Chu Li nodded slowly. No matter where it is, I can get through it. I hope you can still speak like this when you reach Yinyang Cave. Sun Mingwei glided down the stairs and approached Chu Li, bringing with her a light fragrance that refreshed his mind. She raised her palm and pressed on his abdomen. TSS. A muffled sound like a balloon deflating was heard. Chu Li felt his dantian shattering. His inner energy quickly disappeared from his dantian as if it had become a bottomless pit that devoured all his inner energy. Then, there was not a trace of inner energy left in his body. He still had his strength and didn't feel weak, but he didn't have any inner force. Chu Li's eyes were bright as he glared at her. This time, it's your dereliction of duty, Saint. Mo Qianjun was clearly unsuitable, yet you insisted on giving him a chance. Senior Sister Li and Senior Sister Lu's sacrifice was in vain. They can be considered to have achieved great success and stepped into the great light surpassing state, Sun Mingwei said. Chu Li scoffed. If he's dead, he's dead. Sun Mingwei shook her head and said, now that things have come to this, there's no point in saying anything more. Chu Li replied, Saint, you're the one who caused the deaths of the two senior sisters. Sun Mingwei scoffed. You hate me too? Yes, Chu Li said in a low voice. Sun Mingwei looked at him. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you? You've already made your move. Chu Li replied. The Yinyang Cave is hard to pass, and the Sharp Vigor Battalion is even harder. You're not going to let me live. At least you have some self-awareness. Sun Mingwei said. Chu Li said, but I will definitely break through. You're all talk. Let's see what you're capable of, Sun Mingwei said. If you can return to the Holy Church of Light, I'll apologize to you in person. I'll be waiting, Chu Li said in a low voice. Sun Mingwei waved her hand. Go. Chu Li turned and walked out. When he arrived outside the hall, two middle-aged men were already waiting there, calm and expressionless. Chu Li knew at a glance that they were from the torture chamber. They took a step forward and said in a low voice, Follow us to the Yinyang Cave. Chu Li said nothing. The two escorted him down the mountain, one in front and one at the back. Soon, they descended the Great Light Peak and arrived at a nearby peak. This peak was not as tall as the Great Light Peak. It was less than half the height of the Great Light Peak. When the three of them arrived at the peak, they saw a towering boulder. There was a cave on the boulder. It was wide and spacious, the height of 2 people and the width of 2 people. Standing outside, they could see everything in the cave. They stopped and pointed at the cave. Go in, this is the Yinyang Cave. The two were amiable and polite. Chu Li could read their minds. They were certain that he would die. No one in the Yinyang Cave could survive a month. There was no need to be too harsh on someone who was bound to die. They should be as lenient as possible. Chu Li stood still and sized up the Yinyang Cave. From the name, he thought it would be a place with strong yin winds. He did not expect it to be so bright and at the peak. The Yinyang Cave looked like a comfortable residence. There were stone tables, chairs, and beds with bedding. It was clean and tidy. Chu Li turned and asked, How long has the longest stay in the yin-yang cave been? 7 days. A middle-aged man smiled bitterly. I don't think anyone has lasted 7 days. I'm definitely going to die. Chuli asked. The other middle-aged man said, others can't last 7 days, but it doesn't mean you can't, junior brother Zhao. Chuli smiled and walked into the cave slowly. As soon as he stepped into the cave, a wave of extreme yin and cold energy seeped into his body. The blood in his body froze, and so did his consciousness. His mind went blank, and he remained motionless. It was as if time had stopped. After an unknown period of time, he slowly regained consciousness and realized that he was still standing on the same spot. His body was like a statue, unmoving. 2 middle-aged men stood outside, sizing him up without moving. Their expressions were full of pity. He smiled at them, but before his smile faded, a wave of extreme yang and hot energy seeped into his body. Excruciating pain shot through him, as if he had been plunged into magma or molten iron. His mind went blank and lost again. Time seemed to have stopped. After an unknown period of time, he regained consciousness again. Before he could move, another wave of extreme yin and cold energy seeped into his body. His body and mind were frozen again. Time seemed to have stopped. In front of these 2 strange energies, he was so weak that he could not resist at all. Even the void of his mind was frozen. He could not resist and could only allow them to control him. He only had 3 to 4 breaths to stay conscious. The rest of the time, he was frozen or burned to the point that he could not control himself. He found that his body was getting weaker and weaker, and he could barely stand. After another wave of extreme yang energy attacked him, when he woke up, he found that he had already fallen to the ground. He hurriedly got up and lay on the bed. Then, he was once again frozen by the power of extreme cold. During the few times he was conscious, he had the urge to escape with God's limbs. Even if he was exposed, it was better than dying here. This yin-yang cave was too strange. He could not withstand it no matter how capable he was. It was no wonder he could only last 7 days. He was not confident that he could last 7 days. He wanted to test if he could use God's limbs. If he really cannot take it, he would use God's limbs to have a way out. In the end, he secretly tried and found that God's limbs could not be used. This yin-yang cave was so strange that it could restrain divine powers. Chapter 10:17. His heart tightened. Without the God's limbs, he wouldn't be able to escape and his path of retreat would be cut off. Was he going to die here today? This yin-yang cave was very strange. Even if he died, it was unknown if the life and death scripture could revive him. He only had 1 life, so he couldn't risk it. If he really died here, it would be too unjust. With a thought, before he was frozen, he hurriedly executed the life and death scripture. Unexpectedly, the life and death scripture had no effect at all. There was no spiritual energy in the surroundings, as if it was isolated by the cave, unable to approach him. The cave he was in seemed to have become a forbidden area. Divine abilities couldn't be used, and spiritual energy couldn't approach. Spiritual chi couldn't get close to him, so he couldn't alleviate his current predicament. His body was getting weaker and weaker. After every cycle of yin and yang, he would weaken a little. If this continued, he wouldn't even need to endure for more than 7 days before he would turn into ashes. He had tried the Mavrokuna's immobility scripture, the scripture of great light, the heavenly demon scripture, the omniscient mirror, the white tiger power, and the cloud slashing power, but none of them worked on the yin and yang energies. In the end, he had to rely on the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture. He tried his best to comprehend the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture, but to no avail. In the span of a few breaths, just as he thought of the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture, he was a loss again. His mind went blank, and he didn't know anything. The next time he woke up, he thought of the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture again, and his mind froze again. In the process of trying again and again to remember and lose again and again, time continued to pass. He realized that he was getting weaker and weaker. He had completely lost his sense of the outside world and time. He could only remember and forget. His original thoughts seemed to be dissipating, and the memories of the past became more and more blurry. It was as if he was about to lose all his memories. He was horrified. He was not afraid of physical pain, but the horror of Inyan Cave was its effect on one's spirit. While harming one's body, it was also harming one's spirit. If his spirit was not naturally stronger than others, he would not be able to feel fear. Otherwise, he would have turned into an idiot and died silently. His unwillingness to die and his determination to live made him fight against the damage with all his might. The scriptures of the Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture kept circulating in his mind, over and over again. The frozen void in his mind seemed to be slowly recovering. The Buddha and the devil started chanting the scriptures respectively. The Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture was especially fast. It circulated in his mind again and again, resisting the corrosion of the yin and yang forces. As the circulation of the Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture sped up, he gradually came to a realization. What was yin and what was yang? Yin and yang were originally one. Yin and yang circulated endlessly, mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. The Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture could convert yin and yang. When the chi of extreme yang attacked him, he converted it into the chi of extreme yin. Although it was not much, it was enough to prevent him from losing consciousness from being burnt by the chi of extreme yang. In the blink of an eye, the extreme yin chi arrived. He converted it into extreme yang chi to counteract the extreme yin chi, preventing it from solidifying his body and spirit. The Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture circulated faster and faster. Towards the end, he was able to convert the chi of yin and yang at will. Yin yin, yang yang, yang yin yin yin. He could control it as he wished. Not only was his body unharmed, but it was also becoming stronger and stronger as the yin and yang interchanged. Unbeknownst to him, he was already sitting in the same posture as the Buddha in his mind. The Buddha was sitting on a lotus while he was sitting on the stone bed. His hands were forming the same hand seal, and his expression was also solemn, and compassionate. Unknowingly, his Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture had improved tremendously, and his comprehension had increased tremendously. He was no longer the same as before. He suddenly had an inexplicable confidence that he would not be at a disadvantage even if he were to go against Monk Shishan. He must kill him and avenge Li Ruolin and Lu Xun. In this way, he would be able to repay Li Ruolin and Lu Xun's favor. The grudges between them would be cleared, and he would no longer feel guilty or burdened by dealing with the Holy Church of Light. His heart was filled with murderous intent, and he was in high spirits. He suddenly felt that heaven and earth were different. The heaven and earth in his eyes were no longer the same as before. The two middle-aged men who were sitting on the stone outside and guarding looked at each other in surprise. They were not too far away from Chu Li, so they could clearly see his every move. They could see his expression in every tiny movement. They also noticed that there was a strange smile on Chu Li's face. The confusion from before slowly dissipated, and it was obvious that he was experiencing a strange change. It was very different from when he first entered Inyan Cave. His body was weakening rapidly in the beginning, but now it was gradually strengthening. It was a completely opposite process, and they had never noticed such a change. 7 days had passed without them noticing. Logically speaking, Zhao De should have weakened to the point of death. No matter how strong a person was, they would not be able to endure 7 days of yin and yang chi's torture. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and dust to dust, returning to heaven and earth. I'll report to the saint. A middle-aged man said softly. The other middle-aged man shook his head gently. Let's wait and see. This was a very abnormal situation. It was highly possible that he was experiencing a terminal lucidity. 3 days passed by unknowingly. They noticed that Chu Li's aura was growing stronger, and his initial weakness was completely gone. He sat calmly on the stone bed, solemn, with a strange smile on his face as if the yin and yang qi could no longer invade him. "I'll report to the saint." One of the middle-aged men could not hold it in any longer and turned to leave Yin Yang Peak. Sun Mingwei appeared before Yin Yang Cave in a white tunic and a white veil covering her face. As soon as she approached, her heart was alerted and she was not allowed to approach. She knew it was dangerous, so she did not approach. The Yin Yang Cave remained unchanged, and the Yin and Yang Qi was still there. One could enter, but not exit. She sized up Chu Li, who sat solemnly on the stone table, as if he had passed away. She called out, "Zhao De." Chu Li opened his eyes and smiled. "What brings you here, Saint? Is it time?" Sun Mingwei shook her head and took 2 steps back. "Can you hold on?" "Of course." Chu Li smiled. "This is a wonderful place." "Do you need food?" Sun Mingwei asked. Those who stepped into Yin Yang Cave did not need food because they would not eat it even if they were given it. Chu Li was the first person to be so clear-headed, unaffected by the Yin and Yang Qi, and able to speak with a clear mind. It seemed that his life could be preserved. He was indeed a man of great fortune, to be able to survive. Chu Li shook his head. "No need." "All right." Sun Mingwei waved her hand. "Stay here." She turned and left Yin Yang Cave. Chu Li got down from the stone table and began to move around in the cave, practicing a fist technique. When he threw out a punch, it was sometimes light and sometimes heavy. When he threw out a punch, there were several changes. He tried to use the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture to convert the Yin and Yang Qi. The Yin and Yang Qi was extremely pure. If he could absorb it into his body and make it part of his cultivation, it would be great. It was a pity that this idea could not be realized. His body was like a bottomless bottle, unable to contain inner energy. Chu Li got off the stone bed and slowly left Yin Yang Cave. As soon as he stepped out of Yin Yang Cave, his clothes turned to dust, revealing the floating silkworm treasured clothing. Sun Mingwei took a step back. Chu Li had an aura that made her wary. It was the Yin and Yang energy of Yin Yang Cave. After a while, the Yin and Yang energy dissipated and Sun Mingwei felt slightly better. She took out a jade bottle and tossed it to Chu Li. "Take the miracle cure pill and report to the Sharp Vigor Battalion." Chu Li flicked the jade bottle back to Sun Mingwei. Sun Mingwei caught it and looked at him with a frown. Chu Li said faintly, "I've recovered my cultivation level and even improved. Thank you, my saint." Sun Mingwei sized him up. Chu Li smiled. "Thanks to Yin Yang Cave, my cultivation level has improved greatly." Suddenly, a strong gust of wind surged around him. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged and was converted into his cultivation level. The inner energy of the divine light technique was growing stronger and stronger. It went round after round, purifying and purifying. His cultivation level was recovering rapidly. He decided to use this opportunity to display the life and death scripture under the name of the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture so that he could use it openly in the future. He also used this opportunity to change Zhao De's personality and restore his original personality. After acting as Zhao De for a long time, he felt a little awkward. It was as if he had covered up his original personality. If this went on, there would be problems. He realized that this was the drawback of the heavenly demonic power. After a long time, cultivating the heavenly demonic power would cause his personality to fluctuate. It was inevitable that he would be temperamental. Sun Mingwei said, "Zhao De, you've changed." She could feel the change in Chu Li's temperament. It was still Zhao De's body, but not the original Zhao De. It was as if he was a different person. This Yin Yang Cave was strange. It could wear down one's spirit and change one's personality. There are many precedents. Chu Li smiled. "I've changed. The original Zhao De is dead. I hope you can change your impulsive and hot-tempered personality." Sun Mingwei nodded slowly. Her efforts did not go to waste. Those who survived Yin Yang Cave had a high chance of changing their personalities. Zhao De looked much calmer and steadier. "This could not be better." Chu Li said, "I will." "Saint, should I make a move now?" You can return to Great Light Peak and rest for a day. Tomorrow, you'll depart for Falling Autumn City, Sun Mingwe said. Falling Autumn City? Chu Li frowned. Sun Mingwe said, there's a fierce battle outside Falling Autumn City. You'll join Soaring Eagle Cavalry's Sharp Vigor Battalion. Yes, Chu Li Fist saluted and replied calmly. Chapter 1019. P.S. Update complete. I'm really sorry. Status. He exited Inyang Cave and gradually fell hungry. A month's worth of hunger seemed to erupt at once, like a flood or a ferocious beast. His stomach rumbled like thunder. The sun shone brightly in the sky. It was noon. Sun Mingwe sighed in relief when she heard his stomach rumble. This was normal. She waved her hand. Go to the flavorful tower to have your meal and rest. Come to the Divine Light Basilica tomorrow morning. Yes. Chu Li closed fists, saluted, and vanished in a blink. Sun Mingwe watched him leave and nodded slowly. His martial arts had indeed improved greatly. Time-step speed was astonishing, but no matter how strong one's martial arts was, one might not survive in the Sharp Vigor Battalion. She turned to glance at the two middle-aged men. Don't tell anyone about this. Yes, Saint. They closed fists, saluted. They knew that Zhao Dai's case was too bizarre. He was inhuman to be able to stay in Inyang Cave for a month. No one would believe it, even if they told. Sun Mingwe waved her hand. The two men closed fists, saluted tactfully, and left. Sun Mingwe studied the Inyang Cave, but her instincts warned her to stay away. She dared not approach. As the saint of the Holy Church of Light, she bore heavy responsibilities. Her master did not manage, and everything in the church was on her. If anything were to happen to her, it would be fatal to the Holy Church of Light. Inyang Cave was indeed mysterious. It was a pity that Zhao Dai was the only one who survived for a month. He was extraordinary indeed. Inyang Cave was a place of life and death. Once one survived, one would gain great benefits. Judging by his appearance, it was not just his martial arts that improved, but other benefits as well. It was a pity that this fellow was rebellious and uncontrollable. It was truly troublesome. Let's see if he could survive the Sharp Vigor Battalion this time. She rubbed her brows and shook her head with a sigh. It was difficult to decide if Zhao Dai should be killed or kept. It all depended on his luck. Chu Li hurried to the flavorful tower. Once he stepped inside, the surroundings fell silent. Those who were talking stopped, and those who were walking quickly took their seats. People glanced at him and quickly averted their gazes as if avoiding a snake or scorpion. Chu Li could not be bothered with them. He took the plate and went to serve the dishes. He carried a big plate full of dishes and came to the table, burying his head in food. After he sat down, the disciples who were originally around him stood up one after another and distanced themselves from him. Their movements were swift and agile, displaying the Holy Church of Light's light body technique to the fullest. In just a short while, there was a large empty space. The tables and chairs around him were all empty, forming an empty space. Chu Li had the omniscient mirror, so naturally he could see everything clearly. However, he could not be bothered to pay attention to it, so he buried his head in his food. After finishing one plate, he went to get another. He finished it quickly and then got another plate. Everyone looked at him with astonishment in their eyes. Was he the reincarnation of a hungry ghost? He ate so much. When he thought of the punishment he received, he felt a little enlightened, but also a little disdainful. He deserved it. At that moment, Qin Huaichuan and Meng Luo entered the flavorful tower. Qin Huaichuan was still as handsome as ever, and Meng Luo was still as burly and majestic as ever. When the two of them walked into the flavorful tower, they realized that the flavorful tower was no longer as noisy as it used to be. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. They looked around in surprise and immediately noticed Chu Li. The two of them glanced around and smiled. Qin Huaichuan sat opposite Chu Li and gave him a fist salute. Junior brother Zhao, are you all right? Chu Li lifted his head and glanced at him. According to Zhao Dai's original personality, he would have scolded him immediately. Now that he had reverted to his original personality, he looked at him calmly and nodded with a smile. Senior brother Qin, senior brother Meng, it's rare for you to sit here. Qin Huaichuan was stunned. He had expected Chu Li to scold him, but he did not expect such a reaction. Meng Luo also looked at Chu Li in surprise. Chu Li smiled and lowered his head to continue eating. Qin Huaichuan said, "I heard that junior brother Zhao killed altar leader Mo." Meng Luo and the others stared at him. When they heard the news, they did not believe it at first. To them, altar leaders were unreachable and unreachable existences. They might not be able to reach such a level in their entire lives. They were truly influential figures. They did not expect such an influential figure to die in the hands of Zhao Dai. Zhao Dai had cultivated for less than a year. Although they were defenseless against him, he should be far weaker than altar leader Mo. They did not expect him to kill altar leader Mo. Chu Li nodded. "Yes, I killed him." "Why?" Qin Huaichuan asked anxiously. Chu Li said, "He plotted against senior sister Li and senior sister Lu. He deserves to die." "That can't be right." Qin Huaichuan frowned. "Altar leader Mo is an altar leader no matter what. How could he do such a thing that violates the rules of the church? What does it matter?" Chu Li said calmly. "He's dead and I've been punished. I heard that junior brother Zhao is going to join the Sharp Vigor Battalion." Qin Huaichuan asked. Chu Li smiled. "Junior brother Qin, you're so concerned about me?" Qin Huaichuan smiled. "We're from the same faction." "Yes." Chu Li smiled. "Thank you for your concern, senior brother Qin." Qin Huaichuan felt that it was strange. Zhao Dai seemed to have changed into a different person. How could he be so friendly? However, looking at him, he seemed to have turned into someone who hid a dagger behind his smile. He was even more difficult to deal with. "I wonder which Sharp Vigor Battalion junior brother Zhao is going to join?" Qin Huaichuan asked. "Don't tell me it's Falling Autumn City." The Li dynasty and the Qiu dynasty were currently locked in a war in Falling Autumn City. If Falling Autumn City did not fall, the Qiu dynasty's cavalry would not be able to enter. However, once Falling Autumn City fell, the Qiu dynasty's cavalry would march straight in and even plunder the Li dynasty's capital, Jade Capital. "It's Falling Autumn City," Chu Li answered while eating. "Really Falling Autumn City?" Qin Huaichuan was shocked. "I heard that it's a terrible place. 6 senior brothers and sisters have fallen. There were not many disciples of the Holy Church of Light outside. Losing one was a great loss because the Holy Church of Light adhered to the principle of quality over quantity. Every disciple of the Holy Church of Light was precious. Losing 6 disciples of the Holy Church of Light was considered a great loss." Chu Li smiled. Meng Luo glanced at Chu Li and scoffed. "The Sharp Vigor Battalion is made up of sacrificial warriors. They do the most dangerous things and have a slim chance of survival. I heard that junior brother Zhao's martial arts has been crippled." Chu Li's incident had spread throughout the Holy Church of Light. Everyone in the Great Light Peak knew about it. Although they did not know the inside story, they knew the outcome of his punishment. They did not know what a month in Inyan Cave was, but they knew that his martial arts were crippled and he was to be thrown into the Sharp Vigor Battalion. Even if his martial arts were not crippled, he might not survive in the Sharp Vigor Battalion, let alone crippled. Chu Li smiled. "My martial arts have recovered." "Recovered in a month?" Qin Huaichuan was shocked. Chu Li said, "I comprehended the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture in Inyan Cave and recover my martial arts." "Senior brother Qin, the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture can really recover martial arts." He looked at Qin Huaichuan with a smile. Qin Huaichuan felt chills down his spine. He did not believe his words. Chu Li was obviously hiding a knife behind his smile. He was plotting against him to take revenge. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. "You can recover your martial arts as long as you reverse the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture." It was easier said than done. Reversing the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture was a path to death. Without sufficient spiritual energy, once reversed, one would not be able to withstand the weakest moment and die immediately. He was confident that if Qin Huaichuan dared to reverse the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture, he would definitely die. Junior brother Zhao? Sun Lihua and Song Donglin entered the flavorful tower and were surprised to see Chu Li. They nodded with a smile but did not sit over. Instead, they sat far away from him. Chuli glanced around, but did not see Mo Suetsue. He sighed to himself. Chapter 10:20. He suddenly felt a sense of relief. From now on, he could deal with the Holy Church of Light without any worries. He no longer had to worry about his friends in the Holy Church of Light. From now on, the Holy Church of Light was his enemy. There was no need to be courteous. His current mission was to climb to a higher position as soon as possible and get on Sun Mingyue's good side to change his temper. Then, he would accumulate merits and ascend to the position of altar leader as soon as possible. Then, he would be able to participate in confidential matters and obtain more important information. As for dissolving the Holy Church of Light, he still did not have the ability to do so. He needed to go deeper and reach a higher position to do so. It was difficult to disintegrate a sect that had been passed down for thousands of years by himself. The best way was to start with the saint. Unfortunately, Sun Mingyue was extremely powerful, and he was not qualified to be her opponent. At this thought, he was motivated to make a name for himself in the Sharp Vigor Battalion. Qin Huaichuan shook his head. It seems that Junior Sister Sun and the others are afraid of you. After all, you killed altar leader Mo, Chuli asked Senior Brother Qin. Aren't you afraid? I know you won't kill indiscriminately. Qin Huaichuan said, everyone knows about the grudge between you and altar leader Mo. I just didn't expect it to end like this. Everyone thought that Zhao Dai would be the one to suffer, but they did not expect him to be the one to kill altar leader Mo. It was a rare act of insubordination, but it also made them feel a sense of pride. However, no matter how proud they were, they still had to avoid him as a jinx. Chuli said, you should leave. Let's drink after you leave the Sharp Vigor Battalion. Sure, Chuli replied. He realized that Qin Huaichuan was interesting and worth fighting. Qin Huaichuan and Meng Luo left to serve the dishes and sat at another table. Once again, Chuli was alone and buried his head in his meal. After his meal, he returned to the spirit medicine nursery and was met by Zhou Huang. He blocked Chu Li's path with his short and fat body and sized him up. Chu Li smiled. Elder Zhou, I'm leaving. You're going to die. Zhou Huang scoffed. You killed Mo Qianjun. How dare you? To survive the Yinyang Cave and the Sharp Vigor Battalion? Difficult, difficult, difficult. He shook his head as he spoke. Chu Li replied, I can even survive Yinyang Cave, let alone a small Sharp Vigor Battalion. It's your ability to survive in Yinyang Cave. It's your luck that you can survive in Sharp Vigor Battalion. Zhou Huang scoffed. If you're unlucky and encounter a dangerous military order, you won't be able to survive no matter how capable you are. In the face of a military formation, an individual's martial strength is not worth mentioning. That might not be the case. Chu Li shook his head. Sigh, you've never seen a military formation before, so you don't know how powerful it is, Zhou Huang said. Remember not to stand out. It's okay to hide a little. Chu Li smiled. Elder Zhou, don't worry. I'm very lucky. You're the one who's going to die. Zhou Huang replied snappily. Who knows who's more fortunate on the battlefield? Anyway, there are some pills in your house. Take them with you. Thank you, Elder Zhou. Chu Li gave a fist salute. He had already seen a dozen jade bottles on the table in his room. They were all medicines that could increase inner energy and heal wounds. He took a bag and packed them all in. Then, he sat cross-legged on the bed and began to check his cultivation level. This time, his cultivation level had improved not only in Zhao Dai's divine light technique, but also in Chu Li's cloud slashing power. His meridians were strengthened, so his inner energy was pure. His dantian was expanded and strengthened, so it could accommodate more inner energy. A smile appeared on his face. This time, it was a blessing in disguise. However, he still had a long way to go if he wanted to surpass Sun Mingyue. He had to improve himself faster. He disappeared from the small house and reappeared in the residence in adjacent town. Xiaoqi was sitting quietly on the bed in the west room. Suddenly, her beautiful face twitched and she opened her eyes. Chu Li pushed the door open and walked out. Xiaoqi did the same. Both of them came to the gazebo in the courtyard. "It's been a month," Xiao Qi said. "Did you encounter danger over there?" Chuli shook his head and smiled bitterly. He told her what happened. Xiao Qi frowned and shook her head. "Why did you do that? If I didn't, I would have let down senior sister Li's kindness." Chuli sighed. "It's a pity that she's dead. She entered the great light surpassing state. So she's not dead," Xiao Qi said. "She's not ashes. We'll meet one day." Chuli laughed. "I can't enter the great light surpassing state. How can we meet?" "That's not necessarily true. You can enter the great light surpassing state if you cultivate the great light scripture to its ultimate state," Xiao Qi said. "We'll meet then." Chuli chuckled. She looked calm and did not seem to be jealous, but he knew that she was. Xiao Qi asked, "Are you going to join the Sharp Vigor Battalion in the future?" "I'll definitely join." Chuli nodded. "I'm not satisfied with my current situation. I must ascend to a higher position. There's nothing much to do here. I'll keep an eye on it. If it doesn't work, I'll crush the Saraira or the Jade Pendant," Xiao Qi said. Chuli smiled. The night passed quickly. The next morning, he arrived outside the Divine Light Basilica. A young lady in green was waiting there. When she saw him, she waved her hand. "Junior brother Zhao, come in quickly. The saint is waiting." Chuli Fist saluted and slowly walked into the basilica. Sun Mingyue was sitting behind a desk. She was dressed in white, and her face was covered with a white veil, revealing only her beautiful almond-shaped eyes. She looked at him. "You'll depart today. Someone will send you there." Chuli Fist saluted. "What do you have to say?" "I have nothing to say." "Very well. Behave yourself when you're there." "Yes." Chuli Fist saluted and smiled. "Saint, you don't have to worry. I'm no longer the Chuli of the past. I hope you can change." Sun Mingwen nodded. "Someone, call Patrol Lu over." "Yes," the young lady outside responded. A moment later, Lu Yunxin came in and Fist saluted. "Saint, bring him to the Sharp Vigor Battalion of Soaring Eagle Cavalry." "Yes." Sun Mingyue waved her hand, and the two retreated silently. The two left the Divine Light Basilica. Lu Yunxin looked at Chu Li with a smile and pursed her lips. "Junior brother Zhao, you're quite brave. You dared to kill Altar Leader Mo. However, you're quite capable to be able to do so. Senior sister Lu, you flatter me." Chuli Fist saluted and smiled. He had regained his original personality. He felt carefree and natural. His thoughts were clear, and he was indescribably relaxed. "Let's go. We'll head there as soon as possible, so that the saint won't blame us." Lu Yunxin smiled. Chuli Fist saluted. The two traveled during the day and hit at night. They were extremely fast and arrived at Falling Autumn City in the evening 2 days later. Soaring Eagle Cavalry was located in Falling Autumn City. The military camp was located in the northeast corner of the city. The military camp was a series of buildings. It was completely different from the surrounding buildings. One could tell at a glance that it was a military camp. The wide gate allowed 4-horse carriages to pass side by side. For soldiers stood in front of the gate with their hands on their swords. Their eyes were bright, and they exuded a strong, killing intent. Chapter 10:21. Lu Yunxin turned to look at Chu Li. Chu Li said, "Let's go in." Lu Yunxin said, "Junior brother Zhao, if you want to come out after you go in, you'll only be able to gain merits and become a centurion." "I know," Chu Li said. Lu Yunxin saw his calm expression and knew that it was useless to say more. She walked to the gate and took out a metal plate and tossed it to a soldier. The soldier looked at it carefully and passed it to another soldier. After the 4 soldiers looked at it, they took 2 steps back and made way. One of the soldiers said, "Follow me." He led the way, and the 3 entered the military camp. Once they stepped into the military camp, they saw round tents arranged neatly. The tents were spaced wide enough for horses to run. They walked along the main road in the center and soon came to a wide training field. There were hundreds of horses galloping in a circle. More than 200 people were stabbing at the riders on horseback with long sticks in their hands. The riders on horseback jumped up and down, trying their best to avoid the blows. These riders were mostly thin and strong. There were no tall ones. The tall ones were not agile in dodging. Their large bodies were too heavy, consuming too much horsepower and slowing down the horses. Chu glanced at them and compared them to the Ji dynasty's army. He sighed. The Ji dynasty's army might be more strict, but it lacked a bit of fierceness. Lu Yunxin said, "Soaring eagle cavalry is light cavalry. They are agile and fast. Their archery skills are outstanding. You have to practice riding, or it'll be hard to gain merits." Chu said, "Which army is the heavy cavalry?" "Black Bear Cavalry," Lu Yunxin said. The soldier who led the way glanced at Lu Yunxin, but did not say anything. Chu said, "So, the two armies are not the same? They're all under the general's tent for unified deployment during the war," Lu Yunxin said. Chu nodded. The three of them went around the martial arts field and came to a big tent not far from the field. The tent was no different from its surroundings. The soldier came to the tent and closed fist saluted. "General, someone with the Soaring Eagle badge is asking for an audience." "Come in." A clear voice came from inside. The soldier stretched his hand to the side and gestured for the two to enter. He then turned and left. Lu Yunxin entered the big tent with Chu Li following closely behind. The interior of the tent was brightly lit. Behind a wide and large table, there was an armchair. The armchair was covered with a white tiger skin, shiny and flawless. A slim young man sat steadily on the white tiger skin. He was handsome, and his mustache added a bit of maturity to his temperament. He sat tall and straight, his aura sharp, and he was reading a book in his hand. Hearing the footsteps, he slowly put down the book, as if he couldn't bear to let go of it. He raised his head to look at the two. "Greetings, General Yang." Lu Yunxin gave a fist salute and bowed. "I'm here on the Saint's orders to send someone to the Sharp Vigor Battalion." General Yang laughed heartily. He put down his book and cupped his fists. "I didn't expect Patrol Envoy Lu to grace us with your presence. Please excuse me for not going out to meet you." General Yang is too polite. Lu Yunxin smiled sweetly. "This is Zhao De. He killed Altar Leader Mo, and his martial arts was crippled by the Saint. He was then thrown into the Sharp Vigor Battalion." "Crippled?" General Yang's expression changed, and he shook his head. "Soaring Eagle Cavalry doesn't keep useless people around." Lu Yunxin said, "General, you're worrying too much. Why would the Saint send a useless person over? Zhao De has recovered his martial arts." "I see." General Yang frowned and looked at Chu Li. "His martial arts looks ordinary. How could he kill an altar leader? Did he use some kind of trick?" He suddenly suspected that Lu Yunxin said that Zhao De had recovered his martial arts because he said he didn't keep useless people around. He knew Sun Mingyue's tricks. Once one's martial arts was crippled, how could it be recovered so easily? If it was that easy, she wouldn't have put in so much effort. Therefore, it was uncertain whether Zhao De's martial arts was still there. "General Yang, you don't believe me?" Lu Yunxin knew what he was thinking just by looking at his expression. She calmly said, "Even if Zhao De hasn't recovered his martial arts, he's qualified to enter the Sharp Vigor Battalion." "Huh?" Yang Ping suddenly laughed. "What are you saying, Patrol Lu? Since the Saint sent him here, I'll naturally accept him. Tell the Saint not to worry and that I'll treat him well. There's no need to treat him specially." Lu Yunxin shook her head. "He's a genius. If you use him well, he might have a miraculous effect and make a great contribution to the general." "Oh." Yang Ping chuckled and nodded. "All right, I'll remember the Saint's words. I'll use him well. To be honest, everyone in the Sharp Vigor Battalion is dead. There are only two left." Lu Yunxin frowned. "There hasn't been a big battle, right? It's the time for the Sharp Sentinel battle." Yang Ping helplessly said, "It's extremely exhausting. A few people from the Sharp Vigor Battalion die every day. Once they're all used up, they can't be mobilized anymore." "All right." Lu Yunxin glanced at Chu Li. Chu Li stood there calmly, unperturbed. Lu Yunxin calmly said, "He finally has a place to use his skills." Yang Ping said, "I'm asking the Imperial Court for some men and some felons. They'll probably be here soon." "That's good." Lu Yunxin said, "The Sharp Vigor Battalion can't do without people." "That's right." Yang Ping nodded vigorously. Lu Yunxin closed fist saluted. "I've sent him here. I'll take my leave now." She could tell what Yang Ping was thinking. He did not want Zhao De, but the saint was embarrassed. He could only reluctantly accept him, but would not use him. However, the Sharp Vigor Battalion lost so many people every day. They would eventually use Zhao De. However, it was hard to predict how long Zhao De could live under such harsh conditions. She felt that it was a pity, but she could not say anything else. Yang Ping smiled. I'm busy with military affairs. I won't keep you any longer, Patrol Lu. Lu Yunxin glanced at Chu Li and left the tent gracefully. Only Chu Li and Yang Ping were left in the tent. Yang Ping looked him up and down. His face darkened, and he said, You're Zhao De, right? I don't care what position you have in the Holy Church of Light, what you've done, or how glorious you've been. To me, you're nothing. You're just a new recruit. Chu Li said, Yes. Yang Ping stared at him like two swords were stabbing him. Do you think that I'm a lowly official? I dare not, Chu Li said. Yang Ping scoffed. Dare not? Do you think I don't know the disciples of the Holy Church of Light? All of you have eyes on the top of your head. Once you join the Sharp Vigor Battalion, you'll definitely die. You'll die sooner or later. It's all in my hands. Chu Li closed fists saluted calmly. Yang Ping was very dissatisfied with Chu Li. The Holy Church of Light really had a bad temper. Arrogant, and condescending. It was useless to threaten these people who were not afraid of death. Are you still hoping to get promoted to a centurion through meritorious service? Yang Ping returned to the table and sat on the white tiger skin. He said lazily, Then I can leave the Sharp Vigor Battalion? Chu Li said, Yes. He could read Yang Ping's mind. He knew that it was useless to say anything else. The best way was to shut up. Chapter 1022. Chu Li looked at him calmly, without saying a word. Yang Ping was temperamental and cunning. He was not a kind person. It was not easy to work for someone like him. Ha ha. Yang Ping laughed so hard that he rocked back and forth. In the end, he slammed the table and laughed even harder. Chu Li looked at him calmly, his eyes unfazed. Yang Ping stopped laughing and his face darkened. He pointed at him and shouted, You're a disciple of the Holy Church of Light. How can you be so naive? Chu Li replied calmly, Why do you say that, General? Ever since the establishment of the Sharp Vigor Battalion in the Li Dynasty, only 10 people from the Sharp Vigor Battalion have been able to return unscathed and become centurions. All 10 of them have become great generals. Do you really think that you're talented enough to become a great general? Yang Ping's expression darkened, and the corners of his lips curled into a sneer. Chu Li remained silent. Yang Ping sneered. In the eyes of the Holy Church of Light, a grand general is nothing, right? Chu Li replied, I wouldn't dare. Yang Ping scoffed. Why wouldn't the Holy Church of Light dare? Chu Li said, General, I'm being punished by the Holy Church. I was almost expelled from the church. You killed an altar leader and haven't been expelled. Of course, the saint thinks highly of you. Yang Ping curled his lips and said in disdain, But now that you're in my territory, my subordinates, no matter how talented you are, you'll have to listen to me. Yes, Chu Li smiled. Yang Ping was hostile toward the Holy Church of Light. It seemed like the Holy Church of Light was not popular. Yang Ping gritted his teeth and glared at him. Chu Li looked at him calmly. Their eyes seemed to be fighting in the air. It was hard to tell who would win. Yang Ping gritted his teeth and hated Chu Li. These bastards from the Holy Church of Light deserved to die. The Holy Church of Light was the Li Dynasty's national religion, and they were everywhere. The military was also infiltrated by the Holy Church of Light. However, there were also hardliners who firmly opposed the infiltration of the Holy Church of Light into the military. Yang Ping was one of them. He was very dissatisfied with the Holy Church of Light, especially with a woman. Although the saint was wise and powerful, she was still a woman. Guards! Yang Ping bellowed. An armored soldier came in from outside. General, send him to the Sharp Vigor Battalion. Yang Ping ordered coldly. Yes. The soldier gave a fist salute and said to Chu Li, Follow me. Chu Li gave Yang Ping a fist salute and followed the soldier out of the tent. Yang Ping gritted his teeth and glared at Chu Li, his killing intent surging. The armored soldier strode in front of them. He did not say a word and ignored Chu Li. The two of them quickly passed through the martial arts field and the rows of tents. After walking for about a mile, they arrived at a remote location in the southwest corner of the military camp. There were more than a dozen tents in this area, forming a martial arts field. They were quite a distance away from the tents in the distance, forming an independent camp. This martial arts field was half the size of the one he had seen before, but it was still the size of a football field. It was big enough for horses to gallop, but at this moment, it was empty and desolate. Old Fan! Old Fan! The armored soldier shouted. A rotund old man in a gray robe ran out of the tent. He tidied his clothes as he ran over, shouting, I'm here, I'm here. He hurried over and gave a fist salute. Young Jiang, you're a rare guest. It's been a while since you last came. I didn't want to come, the armored soldier said. I've sent someone to you. Haven't you been complaining about the lack of people? Oh, you finally sent someone here. Old Fan's round face looked like a friendly businessman. He shouted happily. How many people are there this time? The one in front of us. The armored soldier said. He's from the Holy Church of Light. He's worth 10 people. Let's go. The Holy Church of Light? Old Fan was overjoyed. He turned to look at Chu Li and sized him up. He clicked his tongue. Good. A disciple of the Holy Church of Light. Thank you, General. The armor will be sent over immediately, the armored soldier said, and turned to leave as if they were in a land of snakes and scorpions. Old Fan gave a fist salute and smiled. All right, thank you, young Jiang. The armored soldier left much faster than he came. He disappeared in the blink of an eye. Old Fan looked at Chu Li happily. Good. From now on, we'll be eating from the same pot. I still don't know your name, brother. I'm Fan Yang. You could just call me Old Fan. Zhao Dai. Chu Li gave a fist salute. Zhao Dai. Good name. Fan Yang smiled enthusiastically. Come, let me introduce you to the brothers in our camp. He raised his voice and shouted, Young Su. A man in his 30s walked out lazily from one of the tents. His arms were bare, revealing his white flesh. His eyes were drowsy as he yawned and said lazily, Old Fan, what's the matter now? Why are you disturbing my sweet dreams? We have a new brother. Fan Yang laughed. We finally formed a team again. The round-faced, middle-aged man's facial features were rather comical. He scoffed impatiently as he walked over. I can't wait for no one. If we form a team, we'll die. If we don't form a team, we'll be able to live freely. Why are you so happy that we're going to die? He shook his head as he spoke. He walked closer to Chu Li and looked at him sideways. Newcomer, what's your name? His name is Zhao Dai. He's a disciple of the Holy Church of Light. Fan Yang laughed. Holy Church of Light? The round-faced, middle-aged man's expression turned serious. The sleepiness on his face disappeared as he looked at Chu Li. Are you really a disciple of the Holy Church of Light? Of course. Fan Yang laughed. Young Zhao, this is young Su Zihong. He has a bad mouth, but he's quite kind. Get lost. You're the kind one. Su Zihong said angrily. Zhao Dai, you don't look like a disciple of the Holy Church of Light. Chu Li smiled. Not all disciples of the Holy Church of Light are handsome. I'm considered special. That's why I was sent to the Sharp Vigor Battalion. Sigh. What a pity. Both of them shook their heads. Fan Yang sighed. A disciple of the Holy Church of Light is an unreachable existence. I can't believe I've met one in person. The disciples of the Holy Church of Light aren't gods. Su Zihong scoffed. They only have one mouth and two eyes. It's extremely difficult to enter the Holy Church of Light. We're not qualified. Fan Yang shook his head and sighed. We don't have such good parents either. I was originally a disciple of a small association in the countryside. I was an orphan. Later, I was discovered by a patrol and entered the Great Light Peak. Chu Li smiled. I can't help it. My aptitude for martial arts is too good. He realized that both of them admired the Holy Church of Light. Their feelings toward him were complicated. They were envious, jealous, and somewhat gloating. If he wanted to integrate into the Sharp Vigor Battalion as soon as possible, he should cater to their interests and talk more about the Holy Church of Light. To outsiders, the Holy Church of Light was mysterious and unattainable. After all, the Holy Church of Light accepted too few disciples. They were considered one in a million. Ah! The two of them exclaimed in surprise. Your aptitude is amazing. They looked at Chu Li in amazement and looked at him in a new light. Chu Li smiled and nodded. It's all right. Then how did you end up here? Su Zihong asked. You fell from the sky into the mud. It's a long story. Chu Li shook his head. It involves many secrets of the church. I can only tell you a few simple things. All right, tell me quickly. The two of them hurried him and widened their eyes in curiosity. Chu Li coughed. I still don't know where my tent is. Chapter 10:23. Chu Li looked at the tent and was quite satisfied. The tent was very spacious and not as cramped as he had imagined. There were 2 beds, 2 cabinets, and 2 tables. It was clean and tidy. 2 people live here. There were originally 2, but now you're the only one. The original people are all dead. Yes, Elder Fan said nonchalantly, they've all left. We're the only ones left in the Sharp Vigor Battalion, and now you're one of us. Su Zihong said, there were 6 people the day before yesterday, but only the 2 of us returned. There were 30 people in our battalion in the beginning. Elder Fan pointed at the surrounding tents. It was quite lively. When the war started, the Sharp Vigor Battalion was like dumplings. We were all thrown into the pot and were quickly eaten up. Elder Fan, what are you talking about? Su Zihong said impatiently. Do you still want to eat dumplings? Come, young Zhao. Tell us how you ended up in such a miserable state. It's so exciting to experience such ups and downs. Chu Li sat cross-legged on one of the beds and briefly told them what happened. He did not go into details. He only told them how he joined the Holy Church of Light and how his guide was killed. He then killed the altar leader who set him up and was punished according to the church's rules. Well done. Elder Fan patted his shoulder and praised, You're loyal and righteous. That's what a good man should be like. There's no need to do this. Su Zihong curled his lips and said disapprovingly, If it were me, I'd keep quiet and work hard. I'll teach this altar leader a lesson when I become a priest. I'll let him have a taste of his own medicine. Chu Li said, He's in Falling Autumn City. After this war, he'll probably become a priest. Sigh, there's no other way. Su Zihong nodded. You can only do it as soon as possible. You don't have a good life. Chu Li smiled. There's no other way. I can only do this. He could tell that his actions had made them admire him and wanted to make friends with him. Everyone liked people who valued friendship and righteousness. The 3 of us probably won't live for long. Fan Yang chuckled and said, You'll be able to meet your sweetheart soon. I'm the most pitiful. I don't have a sweetheart yet. While they were talking, the soldier from before returned. He held a sheathed longsword in one hand and a set of armor in the other. He threw them on the ground and said, Everything's here. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left, as if he was afraid of being tainted by bad luck. Su Zihong stared at the back of the armored soldier and snorted. A ferocious glint flashed across his eyes. Fan Yang chuckled and said, Come, let's see if it fits. Armor is a life-saving item. He picked up the armor and passed it to Chu Li. Chu Li lifted his hand and felt that it was light as a feather. It seemed to be a piece of cloth armor. He knocked on it and realized that this armor was very sturdy. Although it was far inferior to his floating silkworm treasured clothing, it could still block a few blades and spears on the battlefield. He then picked up a long blade and unsheathed it. The blade was snow white and emitted a cold aura. It was a sharp blade, and even though it wasn't a precious blade, it was still a rare sharp blade. He nodded in satisfaction. How is it? Do you like it? Fan Yang chuckled. It can't be compared to the weapons of the Holy Church of Light. Chu Li replied. It's not any worse than the Holy Church of Lights. Fan Yang laughed. Is it really that good? Chu Li nodded. The Holy Church of Light has a divine armament hall, and the weapons they make are similar to this. However, treasure blades of a higher level are of course better than this. Sigh, I heard that there's a royal blade palace in the martial arts world of the Qiu dynasty. There are many treasure blades there. Fan Yang sighed. If we have a treasure blade, it'll be like adding wings to a tiger. Elder Fan, stop daydreaming. Su Zihong scoffed. Chu Li placed the long blade beside his hand and put on the armor. Let's go and have a spar. Fan Yang chuckled. We'll be on the same team from now on, and we'll know each other's strengths. They also wanted to experience the martial arts of the disciples of the Holy Church of Light. It would be an exciting thing if they could defeat the disciples of the Holy Church of Light. The three of them arrived at the martial arts field, and each of them took an ironwood blade. It was as heavy as a real blade, and it was painful enough to cut their bodies. Chu Li deliberately wanted to show off his power, so he subdued them with one swing of his blade. The two of them were thoroughly convinced, and they praised Chu Li for being a disciple of the Holy Church of Light. Chu Li secretly sighed at the importance of his identity. His identity as a disciple of the Holy Church of Light had suppressed them, and when he displayed his powerful martial arts, the two of them immediately admitted defeat. It did not take much effort at all. He also learned about their backgrounds. Elder Fan was a member of the martial arts world, and he was sent to the Sharp Vigor Battalion after killing an Imperial Court official. He had been in the Sharp Vigor Battalion for 10 years, and because there were not many battles, he lived a comfortable life. Su Zihong was originally a centurion, but he fought with another centurion and accidentally killed him. Hence, he was sent to the Sharp Vigor Battalion for 4 years. Both of them were grandmasters. In his eyes, they were not worth mentioning and could not withstand a single blow. However, to others, they were already rare masters. After all, grandmasters were very rare, and that was the reason why they could live until now. In the following days, the Sharp Vigor Battalion seemed to be forgotten. Soaring Eagle Cavalry was deployed from time to time, but the Sharp Vigor Battalion was not involved. Firstly, they had fewer men, and secondly, because of Yang Ping, they did not want to give Chu Li a chance to make a contribution. During the day, Chu Li would cultivate in the Sharp Vigor Battalion. At night, he would return to his residence in adjacent town and chat with Xiao Qi. Sometimes he would stroll along the river and go boating on the river. He had already bought a small boat, so he could ride it at any time. During the day, while he cultivated, he would also use the omniscient mirror to observe the entire Soaring Eagle Cavalry, to see how they trained and how they cooperated. In terms of cavalry, the Li Dynasty was not as good as the Qiu Dynasty, and the Ji Dynasty was not as good as the Li Dynasty. At the end of the day, it all came down to the training methods. At noon 7 days later, he suddenly heard footsteps outside. Through the omniscient mirror, he saw a group of people led by an armored soldier to the martial arts field of the Sharp Vigor Battalion. This armored soldier was the one who had brought Chu Li here earlier. His surname was Jiang, and his name was Jiang Jinfu. He was the general's personal scribe. Fan Yang greeted him with a smile. Elder Fan, I'll leave them to you. They're condemned prisoners from the imperial court, and none of them are good. Jiang Jinfu raised his voice. Fan Yang chuckled and nodded. Leave them to me. Train them well. Otherwise, they'll just be throwing their lives away on the battlefield. Jiang Jinfu said. No problem. Fan Yang smiled. Jiang Jinfu raised his voice and shouted, The newcomer, Zhao De, come with me to get the armor. Chu Li sat on the bed and did not move. It was as if he did not hear anything. Fan Yang quickly said, There's no need for Elder Zhao. Young Su and I will be fine. Jiang Jinfu frowned at him. Fan Yang chuckled. He's been making use of his time to cultivate these few days. Jiang Jinfu's expression darkened. Looks like I can't order him around. Fan Yang smiled. He's busy. We'll be fine. In the army, the strong were respected. Both of them were extremely impressed by Chu Li's martial arts. Moreover, Chu Li had also given them pointers, which had greatly improved their martial arts. Of course, they could not trouble him with such trivial matters. Chapter 1024. P.S. Update complete. I'm slowly recovering. Fan Yang smiled. Young Jiang, I'll go get it. Why must old Zhao do it? I like to see how arrogant he is. Jiang Jinfu sneered. This isn't Great Light Peak. This is Soaring Eagle Cavalry. Yes. Fan Yang chuckled. It's Soaring Eagle Cavalry. But young Jiang, what's wrong with you today? Why do you have to pick a fight with old Zhao? Old Fan, are you trying to pick a fight with me too? Jiang Jinfu sensed that something was wrong with his tone. Fan Yang chuckled and waved his hand. How could I? I was just curious and wanted to ask. The 20 death row prisoners were mostly young and middle-aged. There were no elderly people. They looked at Fan Yang and Jiang Jinfu curiously. They were originally on death row, but were suddenly told that they had a chance to live as long as they could stay in Sharp Vigor Battalion for a year. This was a joyous occasion for them. Even if they could not stay for a year, it would be good to live for a few more days. These people were not afraid of a commotion. They looked at Jiang Jinfu and Fan Yang excitedly, hoping that they would fight. Jiang Jinfu's countenance became more and more gloomy. He was delicate and pretty, not very tall, but he had a good martial arts skill. As the personal imperial bodyguard of the general, he was usually bossy in the army, and had never been contradicted. Su Zihong walked over lazily and glanced at Jiang Jinfu. Why? Are you trying to show off in Sharp Vigor Battalion? Fan Yang quickly waved his hand. Young Su, it's not a big deal. Don't get involved. Su Zihong glanced at Jiang Jinfu. I'll break your neck if you cause trouble again. He looked sleepy and lazy, but he had a bad temper, which was the complete opposite of Fan Yang. All right. Don't break your neck so easily. Fan Yang pushed him and chuckled. Young Jiang, don't stoop to his level. Come, let's go and get some armor. Jiang Jinfu glared at Su Zihong coldly. He knew about Su Zihong. Although he looked skinny, he was extremely strong. Back then, he had broken the neck of his colleague, a centurion, and that was why he had been sent to the Sharp Vigor Battalion. If he angered Su Zihong, he could really break his own neck. Let's go. He snorted angrily and turned to leave. Su Zihong entered Chu Li's tent and sat down on the other bed. What an arrogant villain. This kind of person easily spoils things. We should just kill him. Chu Li shook his head. Or else, we should be like Elder Fan and not offend him. Being in the army, if he were to talk about benevolence, it would only be seen as weakness. Moreover, this was the Great Li army, and he had to maintain a detached attitude. I've given him face, but he's insatiable. He thinks that we're really afraid of him. Su Zihong curled his lips. If he dares to play any tricks, I'll find a chance to kill him. Chu Li nodded. These newcomers are useless. Jiang Jinfu said indignantly, General, I'm just angry, so I want to put an end to his arrogance. His arrogance is the arrogance of the Holy Church of Light. Do you think you can put an end to it? Yang Ping waved his hand. All right, stop humiliating yourself. Get back to business. General, are we just going to sit around and not let them send out their troops? Jiang Jinfu asked. Why don't we just let them send out their troops and destroy them? It would be too easy to destroy the people of the Sharp Vigor Battalion. With just one order, they would be sent to carry out an impossible mission. That would be a hopeless situation where they would not be able to survive even if they were extremely skilled in martial arts. In the face of a military formation, an individual's strength was too weak. Yang Ping said, I have my own plans for this. There's no rush. Understood. Jiang Jinfu did not dare to say anything else when he saw Yang Ping's expression turn grim. General, it's my fault. Yang Ping said in a low voice. Don't provoke him again. Understood. Jiang Jinfu agreed helplessly. He then left the tent unhappily. Yang Ping stared at his back and paced back and forth in front of the table with his hand behind his back. Yang Ping wanted to send Zhao Dai to his death, but he had his concerns. Zhao Dai was a disciple of the Holy Church of Light, and he was a branch leader before he committed the crime. He was not an ordinary disciple. Even an ordinary disciple could not die, let alone a branch leader. If Yang Ping dared to use him as an ordinary soldier of the Sharp Vigor Battalion, and he died in the Sharp Vigor Battalion, would the other disciples of the Holy Church of Light forgive him? Although he had broken the Church's rules, he was not expelled from the Holy Church of Light. He was still a disciple of the Holy Church of Light. The disciples of the Holy Church of Light had a lot of influence in the military and the imperial court. Although he strongly opposed the Holy Church of Light's infiltration into the military, he did not oppose the Holy Church of Light completely. He knew very well how powerful they were, and he was just an ant in front of the Holy Church of Light. Chapter 1025. Early in the morning, Su Tsihong's voice resounded throughout the entire Sharp Vigor Battalion. Come here. Come here. Get up, all of you. I'll hit you 10 times. If you don't come here, I'll hit you 10 times. The people who had just entered the battalion did not care about this. They were all prisoners on death row and had always been rebellious and fearless, so they ignored him. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 1. Su Tsihong's voice rang out. Then he rushed into every tent and threw them out of the tents one by one. Then he started hitting them with the military baton. These people's acupuncture points had been sealed and their backs had been hit 10 times. Their flesh was torn and they were lying on the ground in the martial arts field. Fan Yang folded his sleeves and watched the scene with a smile. Chu Li also stood by the side and looked at these people. He wanted to find a few good ones who could be trained so that they could be of use during critical moments. After Su Tsihong hit them 10 times, their skin was torn and their acupuncture points were unsealed. However, they could not get up and were moaning on the ground. What are you screaming for? Su Tsihong's face darkened. He waved the baton and shouted, You're moaning like a girl. Are you men or not? If you're like this after a few hits, you'll know that it's a piece of cake when you're slashed or stabbed by a spear on the battlefield. Shut up. If anyone screams again, I'll hit you 10 more times. The moaning stopped, and everyone shut their mouths. Only a dull thud could be heard in the field. It was the sound of the baton hitting their backs. After Su Tsihong had hit them one by one, he scoffed with a sullen face. This is the lightest punishment. Tomorrow, I'll count to 5. If you don't answer me within the count of 5, you'll be hit 20 times. I'd rather you die here than die on the battlefield. Everyone was shocked. Chu Li turned around and returned to his tent. Fan Yang smiled and comforted the people, saying that everything was for their own good. Without strict military discipline and adequate training, they would definitely die on the battlefield. It was better to suffer some pain, get some injuries, and bleed some blood here than to die on the battlefield. After using both the carrot and the stick, the 20 prisoners could only bear with it even if they were resentful, so that they would not be hit again. The next day, Chu Li ordered Fan Yang to erect 20 wooden poles on the martial arts field. Each pole was as tall as a person and as thick as a thigh. Chu Li then ordered the students to stand on the poles and walk on them. Everyone had to walk at the same time. As soon as the last person left, the next person would take his place. If one of them walked too slowly or too quickly, they would make a series of mistakes and fall together. Fan Yang and Su Tsihong stood at the side with whips in their hands. Whoever made a mistake would be whipped and their skin would be torn open. Chu Li sat in the tent and cultivated. After his meridians and dantian were expanded and strengthened, his cultivation base had skyrocketed. He needed time to slowly adapt to it. Moreover, he was also observing Yang Ping's thoughts. He knew what he was thinking and was constantly paying attention to the situation of the battlefield. Yang Ping's move was aimed at Chu Li's weak spot. Without any merit, he would not be able to leave the Sharp Vigor Battalion, he would not be able to leave Soaring Eagle Cavalry, and he would not be able to return to the Holy Church of Light. Once this battle was over, he wouldn't have a chance to make a contribution. Moreover, the next opportunity to make a contribution might be against the Ji dynasty. He did not have a strong sense of belonging to the Ji dynasty. After all, he had grown up in the Temple of Autumn. He did not like King or the Emperor. Everything he did was for the High Duke's public house. Once the Ji dynasty was destroyed, the High Duke's public house would not be able to survive. Moreover, if they succeeded in winning the throne, the Ji dynasty would not be an outsider. He did not believe that Yang Ping would be able to suppress him forever. The Qiu dynasty's cavalry was not to be trifled with. The Li dynasty had the upper hand now, because Cheng Lin and Cheng Sun had set up a big formation to block the Qiu dynasty's cavalry. However, the Qiu dynasty was full of talents, and they must have formation masters. Once this formation was broken, the battle would reach its climax. Once all of Soaring Eagle Cavalry was mobilized, the Sharp Vigor Battalion would not be idle. Therefore, he was not in a hurry. He wanted to train these 20 people first. Once they entered the battlefield, they would be able to unleash their power. If he wanted to make a big contribution, he would need their help. With this thought in mind, he created a formation and asked Su Tsihong and Fan Yang to train them while he sat in the tent to comprehend the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture. Previously, when he comprehended the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture in Inyan Cave, his boundary had increased greatly. However, it was too rushed in Inyan Cave. He needed to calm down and slowly sort it out. He needed to convert these insights into something that would be branded in his mind. The atmosphere in Soaring Eagle Cavalry's military camp suddenly became tense. Chuli had already sat in Yang Ping's tent and saw that the formation outside Falling Autumn City had been broken. The Qiu dynasty's cavalry had arrived at the city and was planning to attack. The Qiu dynasty's cavalry was not only powerful in the wild but also in attacking cities. The people in Falling Autumn City were not optimistic. They felt that Falling Autumn City would fall sooner or later if they could not stop the Qiu dynasty's cavalry. Zhang Fengping lay on his bed and panted heavily. He was in so much pain that his face was pale. He was tall, slender, and handsome. He was 23 years old and had reached the peak of the innate realm. He was also a rare expert in the martial arts world. Because his sister was killed by the third young master of the Ma family in the city, he was captured and sentenced to death. He and his sister depended on each other since they were young. Now that she was dead, he had nothing to live for. Not only did he kill the third young master, but he was also prepared to kill the entire Ma family. However, the Ma family was protected by martial arts masters. In the end, he was defeated and sent to prison. He was almost executed. 3 days before his execution, he was sent to the Sharp Vigor Battalion. He did not feel happy at all. He only wanted to kill a few Qiu dynasty's cavalry to satisfy his craving and die a quick death. A young man lay on the other bed. His name was Huang Hu. He was tall and thin, with many pimples on his face. His eyes were bright and full of energy. Zhang Fengping was whipped 3 times while Huang Hu was whipped 5 times. He was in so much pain that he grimaced. What kind of training is this? Huang Hu sighed. If this goes on, I'll be beaten to a pulp. The old injury on his back had not healed yet, and new injuries had appeared. His back was badly mutilated. He had developed a sleeping posture and could not change it. Zhang Fengping lay quietly and said nothing. Huang Hu said, "Elder Zhang, how long do you think we can live?" "Not more than a year," Zhang Fengping said faintly. Huang Hu sighed. "Yes, we'll die if we go there. If we can make a contribution before we die, it'll be considered as earning something for our family." His martial arts had just reached the innate stage. He became a prisoner on death row because he robbed the rich to help the poor. He robbed a rich family to help himself. He learned martial arts and went down a mountain. When he returned home and saw that his family was as poor as a church mouse, he could not help but kill them. In the end, he underestimated the guards of the family and was captured after killing 2 of them. He was thrown into prison and was waiting to be chopped in half at the waist. However, he was sent here. "Sigh, it's worse than death. It's better to be executed directly." Huang Hu shook his head and sighed. "It's too much suffering. It's just a dozen whips and 10 strokes of the stick." Zhang Fengping said faintly. Huang Hu said, "Old Zhang, I'm afraid of pain the most. I'd rather slit my neck with a knife than suffer like this. I've been walking that stake all day, even in my dreams. I'm so tired." Zhang Fengping said, "A small arm can't beat a big leg. I heard that it's Master Zhao's idea." Huang Hu moved his head closer and lowered his voice. "I heard that Master Zhao has a very powerful background. A disciple of the Holy Church of Light," Zhang Fengping said faintly. Huang Hu inhaled sharply. "The Holy Church of Light. We're using a military formation," Zhang Fengping said. "It can indeed save our lives." Chapter 1026. Zhang Fengping glanced at Huang Hu and said, "You don't know about formations?" "I don't." Huang Hu shook his head. He had never heard of formations at his level. Zhang Fengping said, "It looks ordinary, but you'll know how powerful it is when you use it. Can it really save our lives?" Huang Hu asked. "More or less. It all depends on the quality of the formation." Zhang Fengping said, Master Zhao is young and has just entered the Holy Church of Light. I don't think it's a powerful formation. He only knows a little bit about it. It's better than nothing. So we're working for nothing? Huang Hu said indignantly. Are they going to torture us like this? We're free anyway, Zhang Fengping said. He did not care about anything. He had nothing to live for, and everything was dull. Even though the training was difficult and he suffered 2 whips and was in pain, it did not affect him. Huang Hu scoffed. They don't treat us as humans. We're going to die soon, Zhang Fengping said. Elder Zhang, are you willing to die? Huang Hu lowered his voice. Can't we try? I've never heard of anyone in the Sharp Vigor Battalion surviving. Zhang Fengping said, if we don't die today, we'll die tomorrow. We'll die one day. Sigh. Elder Zhang, you're such a boring person. Huang Hu shook his head helplessly. Zhang Fengping looked at him and said nothing. Suddenly, footsteps were heard. A burly young man with a flat face walked in and said softly, Elder Zhang, Elder Huang. They turned their heads. Huang Hu smiled. Su Daxing, you're living a good life. Su Daxing chuckled. How are you? How's your injury? I won't die, Huang Hu said angrily. I'm not as smart as you. I didn't even get whipped. Sigh. Sergeant Su is too cruel. Su Daxing said, he beat us to death. He doesn't treat us as humans at all. He likes to torture us, and the more he beats, the more excited he gets. Yes, yes. Huang Hu quickly nodded. Zhang Fengping looked at Su Daxing and said nothing. Su Daxing said, I can't stand it. Everyone is complaining. That's right. Huang Hu said, if this goes on, we'll be beaten to a pulp. Before we can even fight the enemy, we will be killed by our own people first. That's why we can't just sit here and wait for death. Su Daxing said, we have to let squad leader Su know that we're not sheep that can be beaten and scolded. We're humans too. Exactly. Huang Hu nodded vigorously. Zhang Fengping said calmly, Old Su, what are you trying to do? Let's boycott Sergeant Su's training together. Su Daxing said, as long as we're united, he can't do anything to us. I'm just afraid that someone's willpower isn't strong enough, and they'll be scared off halfway through. This, Huang Hu was startled and immediately felt a little guilty. Isn't this a little too big? Not at all. Su Daxing said, it's not like we're rebelling, and we're not going to attack him. We're just not going to listen to him. Tomorrow morning, everyone, don't go out. Huang Hu looked at Zhang Fengping. Is this really okay? No problem at all. Su Daxing smiled and said, if there's a problem, it's my problem. Everyone listens to me. If there's a problem, I'll take responsibility. That's fine too. Huang Hu smiled and said, let's show him what we're made of, and let him know that we're not pushovers. We have our own temper, so he can't act recklessly. That's right, that's right. Su Daxing chuckled and said, then it's a deal. Don't wake up tomorrow morning. No matter how he threatens you, don't wake up. No problem. Huang Hu said. Su Daxing fist saluted. I still have to speak to the others. I'll take my leave first. Go, go, Huang Hu said excitedly. After Su Daxing left, Huang Hu smiled and said, there's going to be a good show. Old Zhang, will Sergeant Su give in this time? No, Zhang Fengping said. Huang Hu said, even if he doesn't give in, it's fine as long as he's cautious. Zhang Fengping said calmly, let's wait and see. The next morning, no one heard Su Zihang's shouts. Su Zihang and Fan Yang were in Chu Li's tent, chatting as they ate. If you ask me, I'll give each of them 20 strokes of the military stick. Let's see if they're obedient or not. They're audacious enough to collude in secret. Su Zihang took a bite of his bun and chewed it hard. It'll be strange if they don't obey us. Chu Li said, Old Su, we can't use force. It'll make them rebel. We can do that under normal circumstances, but time waits for no man now, and we don't have much time left. That's right, that's right. Fan Yang drank his porridge and chuckled. It's better to use both the carrot and the stick. In short, we have to make them train obediently, and we can put everything else aside. What should we do with Su Daxing? Su Zihang asked. Chu Li said, Old Su, what do you think? Beat him half to death as a warning to others. Su Zihang scoffed. He's audacious enough to overestimate himself. Fan Yang smiled and said, That won't be necessary. They're restless, so we'll just teach them a lesson. Chu Li said, just pretend that you don't know anything. The problem is that they don't have confidence in the formation. Looks like we have to let them know the power of this formation. He glanced at the two of them. Su Zihong and Fan Yang were skeptical as well. They had never seen the power of formation before. They were only convinced by Chu Li's identity as a disciple of the Holy Church of Light and his superior martial arts skills. Therefore, they were willing to train everyone wholeheartedly. What should we do? Train for another 3 days, Chu Li muttered. Then find some people to test its power. Early in the morning, Su Daxing and the others pricked up their ears excitedly. All of them lay on their beds and waited for Su Zihong's voice to be heard. Then they would stay silent and teach him a lesson to vent their anger. However, they lay on their beds until noon. They were so tired that they felt uncomfortable, but they did not hear Su Zihong's voice. They did not eat breakfast, so their stomachs were growling nonstop. They tried to suppress their hunger, but there was still no movement after noon. Su Zihong did not speak, and no food was brought over. They could not wait any longer, so they got out of bed and went to the martial arts field. They saw Su Zihong walking on the poles at an incredible speed. He was a grandmaster, and he had secretly trained at night, so his body movement was graceful and natural. It was not something an ordinary person could compare to. "Sergeant Su, aren't we going to eat?" someone asked. Su Zihong answered while walking, "If we don't train, we won't be able to eat." "Why aren't we training?" "Sergeant Su, you didn't greet us. Do you think I don't know what you're up to?" Su Zihong sneered. "All right, since none of you want to train, let's just sit around. But we can't starve. If you don't want to train, then don't eat." Su Zihong's cold gaze swept across the crowd. "If you want to eat, you'll have to train." Su Daxing raised his voice. "We'd rather starve to death than be trampled on by others." "Very well." Su Zihong scoffed. He did not stop walking and ignore the crowd. When night fell, the crowd gritted their teeth and persevered. They were so hungry that they could not sleep well. The next morning, "Get up, get up, come here, come here." Su Zihong's voice was heard just as dawn broke. "Those who don't come to me by 5 will be punished with 20 strokes of a stick." Apart from Su Daxing, everyone else ran to Su Zihong within the count of 5. Chapter 10:27. P.S. Update complete. I'm busy today, so I don't have to worry about writing. I'll try to write more tomorrow to make up for it. Because he hesitated and exceeded the time limit, he received 20 strokes of the stick. However, Su Zihong did not hit him so hard. He only suffered minor injuries that did not affect his training. Su Daxing initially thought that he would be severely injured after offending Su Zihong. He did not expect to be let off so easily, which made him feel ashamed and grateful. With Su Zihong's temper, he would have beaten him to death. However, Chu Li had reminded him that it was best not to miss any of the 20 men. Even if they were missing, they had to master the formation first. Su Daxing could only suppress his anger and wave his stick. In the early morning, Jiang Jinfu quietly went to the Sharp Vigor Battalion and quickly walked around before hurrying back to the central tent. He fist saluted when he entered. "General, they're still practicing that formation. It's so funny." They also had military training, but they did not practice it this way. Chu Li's method was ridiculous no matter how he looked at it. It was like playing house. There was no power in it at all. It was more like a game. Perhaps this was their last pastime. After all, the Sharp Vigor Battalion would die if they were sent out. They were too weak and could not withstand a single blow. Yang Ping was holding a book. He stood upright and stared at it. "They're still practicing that formation?" "Yes," Jiang Jinfu said. "General, should we tell him to stop fooling around?" "Let it be if he wants to fool around." Yang Ping looked at him from a book. "It's better to keep those guys busy than to do nothing." He did a good deed. With this training method, they eat a lot and consume a lot of food. Jiang Jinfu said, "It's not that bad. There are only 20 of them." Yang Ping waved his hand. "Go, and ask if they want to find someone to spar with them. Let's see what they're practicing." "Yes." Jiang Jinfu quickly responded and strode out of the tent. He quickly arrived at the Sharp Vigor Battalion. Fan Yang greeted him with a smile. Young Jiang, what can I do for you? Old Fan, what are you practicing? Military formation. Hee hee, this is a military formation? Jiang Jinfu shook his head and laughed. All right, the general asked me to come over and help you. Do you need any help? I was just about to ask the general for help, Fan Yang said with a smile. We're thinking of getting a 100-man squad to attack them. 100 men? Jiang Jinfu laughed. Don't joke. I won't joke about this. Fan Yang chuckled and said, according to Master Zhao, these 20 people will have no problem dealing with a 100-man team. Jiang Jinfu laughed. Haha, good. I'll bring some people over in the afternoon. I'll let them know what the Li Dynasty's cavalry is. Sure. Fan Yang smiled and said, then we'll wait. Jiangsu. Su Jiang about that. Fan Su Jiang TT. Jiang about it, Su T about it, you guys about it. To for about T to about to for to about. Jiang about for it, Jiang. For it. Training. It about it. To do. To about T. About. Now practice the stance. Su Hong raised his voice and shouted, everyone, take a blade and point it at an angle. You don't have to make any moves. It's fine as long as you don't get knocked away. Everyone cheered. They didn't have to walk on the stump, and they felt indescribably relaxed. It was as if the ropes binding their bodies had been loosened. They each picked up an ironwood saber from the weapon rack beside them, held it up diagonally, and began to run, stepping on the white circles drawn on the ground. Su Hong and Fan Yang could not help but nod. The 20 of them looked like a saw wheel that was spinning at high speed. They did not need to brandish their sabers, but they were already intimidating enough. It was as if they could cut through anything. After lunch and a short rest, they went on with their practice. The ground suddenly trembled. Then, there was a muffled rumbling sound. 100 cavalrymen arrived like a howling gale. They charged straight into the Sharp Vigor Battalion and charged toward the 20 men. More than 100 cavalrymen each held a scimitar in their hands. Although it was an ironwood scimitar, it would not be fatal if it struck the body, but it would still cause unbearable pain. It could even cause broken bones and tendons. Looking at their aggressive appearance, it was obvious that they wanted to severely injure them. Come down. Set up the formation. Su Hong shouted. Everyone hurriedly leaped down and landed in front of him. Then, they took up their respective positions. Turn the formation. Su Hong shouted. Every now and then, everyone would be whipped by him. They had already subconsciously obeyed his orders. Fear could not stop them from obeying him. They began to run, and the formation immediately began to operate. It cut toward the cavalrymen like a chainsaw. The cavalrymen were agile. When they saw that the situation was not good, they quickly withdrew their sabers and hid under the horses' bellies. Bang, bang, bang. The horses neighed in pain after being struck by the ironwood sabers. The horses' necks were struck by the sabers, and they could not help but neigh as they fell sideways. The horses fell in front of the formation, but they could not stop the formation from operating. They retreated nimbly and avoided the horses that had fallen to the ground. Then, they waited for the cavalrymen behind them to charge toward them. The cavalrymen behind them took advantage of the situation and circled behind them. However, they were still struck by the sabers, and their horses fell one after another. When the 20 men realized that the 100 imposing cavalrymen could not do anything to them, their confidence was boosted. They ran even faster and gripped their sabers even tighter. The horses fell to the ground one after another. They struggled to get up, and the cavalrymen retreated from the battle. If they had used real sabers, their horses would have been dead. The remaining 50 cavalrymen circled around them, looking for their weaknesses. After a while, they took out the bows on their backs and shot headless arrows. The arrows rained down on the men's heads. Puff, 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 puff. The arrows were deflected by the sabers as soon as they reached their heads. The sabers formed a net, and not a single arrow landed on the men. The cavalrymen did not believe this and continued to shoot arrows. The 20 men did not panic. They did not care at all. The densely packed arrows could not penetrate the net made by the sabers. When the cavalrymen finished shooting the arrows in their quiver, they still could not do anything to the 20 men. Therefore, they retreated and decisively left the Sharp Vigor Battalion. This was the tradition of soaring eagle cavalry. If they failed to hit their target, they would retreat. Chuli stood in front of his tent and smiled as he looked at the battlefield. When he saw this, he nodded in satisfaction. These prisoners had great potential. They were able to unleash 30% of the formation's power. It was indeed rare. "Let's go," one of the cavalrymen shouted. "Don't embarrass yourself." 100 cavalrymen could not do anything to 20 infantrymen. It was a great humiliation. They whizzed away and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Jiang Jinfu was the only one left looking at them in confusion. He could not believe this outcome. After all, there were 100 cavalrymen. The power of a cavalryman was far greater than that of an infantryman. 100 cavalrymen could easily defeat 500 or even 1,000 infantrymen. Yet, they could not do anything to these 20 men. More importantly, these new soldiers had only been training for 10 days. Su Zihong shouted, "Stop the formation!" Everyone stopped in unison and remained motionless. After this battle, their spirits had suddenly changed. Their eyes were bright and their expressions were firm. They now had an imposing manner. Chuli smiled. Only soldiers like this could be used and contribute to the battle. Su Zihong and Fan Yang went to Jiang Jinfu and interrupted him from his daze. "Young Jiang, what do you think?" Fan Yang chuckled. "Are you satisfied with this formation? I'll report this to the general." Jiang Jinfu could not bear to see them, so he immediately left. Chapter 1028. Yang Ping sat behind a large table and stroked his mustache as he listened to Jiang Jinfu's report. He nodded thoughtfully. "Does this mean that this formation is quite powerful?" "Yes," Jiang Jinfu replied. "I didn't expect this formation to be so powerful." "General, if these death row prisoners can be trained to this extent in just 10 days, we'll be even more powerful if we train our elites." "It's useless," Yang Ping said lazily. "Soaring eagle cavalry is a cavalry, not infantry. All right, you don't have to worry about this anymore. You're dismissed." "Yes." Jiang Jinfu retreated helplessly. Yang Ping stroked his mustache thoughtfully. After a long while, he shook his head. He still could not send the Sharp Vigor Battalion. This damned Zhao De was such a troublemaker. Although the saint had just sent someone over to instruct them to treat Zhao De as an ordinary person, he would be stupid if he listened to her. The members of the Sharp Vigor Battalion had completely changed. They were energetic and worked even harder without Su Zihong's whips. After witnessing the power of the formation, they treated it as a life-saving skill. As long as they mastered it, they would be able to save their lives on the battlefield. If they did not master it and made a mistake on the battlefield, not only would they implicate their comrades, but they would also hurt themselves. They had to master it, even if it cost them their lives. Chu Li had been cultivating in his tent. Apart from the Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture, he also had the nature restoration manifestation. The battlefield was the best place to cultivate the nature restoration manifestation. 3 days later, the atmosphere in soaring eagle cavalry's camp suddenly became tense. The setting sun was as red as blood. The entire soaring eagle cavalry's camp was shrouded in a blood-red light. Chuli followed Jiang Jinfu to the main tent. He did not say a word along the way as the two of them looked at each other with disgust. When he entered the tent, there were already 10 high-ranking military officers standing inside. Their faces were taut and full of killing intent. Chuli had already recognized them from the omniscient mirror. They were all centurions. "Tomorrow, we'll attack flying cloud cavalry." Yang Ping pressed on the table and looked at the crowd calmly. The crowd immediately whispered to each other. "General, are we going to attack first?" A centurion fist saluted. "Aren't we supposed to defend the city? The Grand General has ordered us to take advantage of their carelessness and attack them head-on to relieve the pressure of defending the city." Yang Ping said, "General, shouldn't we be dealing with the heavy cavalry? Why did they go up against the flying cloud cavalry?" Another centurion asked. Yang Ping said, The Black Bear army will deal with the heavy cavalry. What is the great general trying to do? A centurion frowned and said, "Although our cavalry is powerful compared to the flying cloud cavalry," he said, shaking his head. Everyone shook their heads. They were not ordinary soldiers, so they would not be fooled by the propaganda. They knew very well that their cavalry could not be compared to the Qiu dynasty's cavalry. After all, they had learned from the Qiu dynasty's cavalry, so they were not confident that they could defeat their ancestors. Yang Ping said calmly, "Look at you guys, cowering before the battle." "General, the cavalrymen of the Flying Cloud Cavalry grew up on horseback. It said that all of them are experts in archery." One of the centurions shook his head and said, "It's fine to deal with their heavy cavalry and infantry, but to deal with the Flying Cloud Cavalry," Yang Ping said. "Then what do you think we should do? Surrender?" "Of course we can't surrender. We can ask the great general to step aside." "Oh, do you think the great general is stupid? You don't know this? Then what's going on? Just follow the orders. As for what the great general thinks, you don't have to know. Even I don't know." Yang Ping glared at them coldly, making them feel diffident. The general was temperamental. The calmer he was, the scarier he was. There was no telling if he would suddenly turn hostile and start scolding them. The calmer he was, the more nervous everyone was. They were on guard against him, so they were always nervous when they stood in front of him. Yang Ping's calm gaze fell on Chu Li. "Zhao De, your sharp vigor battalion will clean up the battlefield this time." Chu Li gave a fist salute. "Yes, General." Yang Ping was waiting for him to scold him. As long as he questioned the general, Yang Ping would take the opportunity to vent his anger. "General, they're the sharp vigor battalion, not the supply camp." One of the centurions could not help but say, ever since Zhao De joined the sharp vigor battalion, the general had completely protected the sharp vigor battalion, which made people feel indignant. The sharp vigor battalion was in charge of gathering information. Although they were defending the city now, they still needed information. However, the sharp vigor battalion was completely resting. They were indignant. He was just a disciple of the Holy Church of Light. Why was the general so afraid of him? The general had always said that the disciples of the Holy Church of Light should not meddle in military affairs. His actions were obviously inconsistent with what he said. They were dissatisfied with Yang Ping, so he used Chu Li as a pretext. Yang Ping said coldly, "Is it easy to clean up the battlefield? If we carry the corpses, we'll have to fight them if we encounter them. It's not as easy as charging. All of you shut up." The 10 centurions glanced at Chu Li. They suspected that Chu Li had given the general some great benefits for him to be so protective of him. Jiang Jinfu stood at the side and looked at him coldly. Unfortunately, Chu Li did not lose his composure. He could not watch the centurion's cold eyes and remain calm. He cursed himself. What a thick-skinned fellow. Get ready. Tomorrow, beat the drum as the signal and rush out of the east gate. We'll attack them while they're eating." Yang Ping said in a low voice. "Yes." Everyone gave a fist salute and responded. They turned around and strode out of the tent. Early in the morning, the drums sounded. It was a rare day with good weather. The sun rose early and shone brightly. Everyone from the Sharp Vigor Battalion rode on their horses. They were all clad in radiant armor. Their helmets only revealed their faces, and they carried 2 long blades on their backs. A round shield hung on the left side of their horses, and a longbow hung on the right. Their equipment was neat and well made, gleaming under the bright sun. Apart from their equipment, they also carried a bundle on their horses. The drums continued to beat, but they sat motionless on their horses. The war horses were also clad in radiant armor that revealed their eyes, noses, mouths, and limbs. They were light cavalrymen who pursued speed. Therefore, the radiant armor was very light and could only block arrows from afar. The war horses were tapping their front hooves anxiously. They were extremely anxious, completely different from their masters. Everyone's bodies were tense. They were finally going to the battlefield and might not be able to return. Death was at hand. Some of them wanted to retreat, some were calm, and some were excited. Chu Li was at the front, facing the direction of the camp gate. Suddenly, He turned his head to look at the crowd and said, "With everyone accompanying us, we won't die alone. Even if we go to the underworld, we can still defeat the imps with the formation. What's there to be afraid of?" "That's right. There's nothing to be afraid of," the crowd responded. When they thought about how they would be accompanied when they died in battle, they were no longer as afraid. This was human nature. Bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, 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 bang. Hearing the rhythmic drumming, Fan Yang hurriedly said, "Master Zhao, it's our turn. Let's go," Chu Li shouted. He spurred his mount forward while Su Zihong and Fan Yang followed closely behind him. Soon, there were 20 of them. The riders rushed out of the Sharp Vigor Battalion and onto the spacious road in the center. The cavalrymen in front of them had already rushed out of the main gate of Soaring Eagle Cavalry's camp. They galloped out of the camp gate and entered the main street in the city. Soon, they rushed out of the open east gate. Then, their war horses sped up and galloped eastward along the main road. Chu Li turned his head to look at the people on horseback. Some of them had lowered their helmets while others had removed their helmets to reveal excited, pale, or flushed faces. He could clearly sense their uneasiness. Chapter 1029. He did not use his inner energy, but his words rang clearly in their ears. It was as if a gust of wind had swept across the lake and swept away all the debris. They instantly calmed down and became calm. They were no longer anxious and fearful. This was the magical effect of Mahavairocana's immobility scripture. Su Zihong and Fan Yang looked at Chu Li in surprise. They did not expect him to have such an ability. This ability was very useful. Once a battle broke out, the calmest person would have the highest chance of survival. Restless thoughts would often affect one's judgment and actions. On the battlefield, life and death were often decided in a split second. A single judgment could mean the difference between life and death. Chu Li's voice was calm and steady. "If we don't want to stay in Sharp Vigor Battalion until we die, we can't let go of this opportunity to be free." Everyone became spirited. Chu Li said calmly, "The formation we've been training can be very useful on the battlefield. It depends on whether you can seize the opportunity." Su Zihong quickly asked, "Master Zhao, do we have a chance? Flying Cloud Cavalry is more powerful than Soaring Eagle Cavalry. If we want to defeat them, we'll have to kill their general," Chu Li said. "Turn left." He suddenly tugged on the reins. Everyone left the main road and walked along a small path. Their speed was greatly reduced. At this moment, Yang Ping was in the middle of the army. He was wearing an ordinary radiant armor and was riding his horse. Jiang Jinfu urged his horse forward and whispered, "General, the Sharp Vigor Battalion has deserted. I don't know where they went." "Ignore them," Yang Ping said as he stared into the distance. Jiang Jinfu nodded. Yang Ping frowned. Soaring Eagle Cavalry had been mobilized. He could not let the Sharp Vigor Battalion stay in the camp. Otherwise, they would be criticized. Bringing them out to clean up the battlefield was already an explanation to everyone. As long as they did not rush into the battlefield and stayed obediently, it would be fine. They were probably afraid and did not dare to come over. Forget it. He could just ignore them and settle the score after the battle. He had a complicated mind, and his attitude toward Chu Li was very contradictory. On one hand, he hated Chu Li and did not want him to become a centurion. He could not wait for him to stay in Sharp Vigor Battalion forever. On the other hand, he was worried about Chu Li's identity as a disciple of the Holy Church of Light. He could not wait for Chu Li to leave Sharp Vigor Battalion so that he would not be implicated. Due to these conflicting thoughts, he decided to ignore the Sharp Vigor Battalion and cast them aside. He could not be bothered to deal with them. The hooves of the horses were wrapped in thick cloth, so they didn't make a loud sound when they stepped on the ground. However, this could only be used for short sprints. Once the distance was too long, the cloth would be torn, and the hooves would no longer be able to hide. The Qiu dynasty's cavalry was preparing to attack the city, and the battalions were already very close to falling Autumn City. The Flying Cloud Cavalry was less than 5 miles away from the east gate of falling Autumn City. On a flat and wide plain, 5 miles would only take a sprint. Soaring Eagle cavalry dashed out of the forest and headed straight for a group of tents that were built against the mountain on the grassland in the distance. This was where the Flying Cloud cavalry was located. Jiang Jinfu and the other guards surrounded Yang Ping. Jiang Jinfu solemnly opened a box and hung a heavy black flag on it. The black eagle flag fluttered in the wind, fluttering in the wind. The centurions also unfurled their own flags. Apart from Small Eagle, there was a word embroidered on the side of each flag: Zhao, Zhang, Wang. The 10 flags dispersed, and each charged in a different direction. These military flags were filled with a monstrous killing intent. They were formed by absorbing the killing intent from the battlefield over a long period of time. Inner energy could not be used within a 2-mile radius of the military flags. Even a grandmaster would become a commoner without inner energy and could only rely on his body. These military flags could only be used on the battlefield when they were stimulated by the killing intent. Yang Ping and the other 11 men left the main group and headed toward a hill at the side. Small hills like this would occasionally appear on the flat grassland. Meanwhile, the military camp of the Flying Cloud Cavalry was built against the mountain in the distance. There was water at the foot of the mountain, and the forest was lush and verdant. The camp was a few times higher than the small hills here, so they could see the Flying Cloud Cavalry's attack from afar. Moo! The sound of a bull's horn echoed in the Flying Cloud Cavalry's camp. The Flying Cloud Cavalry reacted very quickly. Before the Soaring Eagle Cavalry could approach them, they had already charged out of the camp's gate. They split into 10 teams and charged diagonally at the 10 teams of Soaring Eagle Cavalry, causing the Soaring Eagle Cavalry a great deal of trouble. Once the war horses started charging, they would move faster and faster like a rolling snowball. If they were to forcefully change their direction halfway, the momentum of their charge would disappear. On the battlefield, momentum was what mattered most. Once the momentum was built up, the combat strength of the cavalrymen would increase greatly. However, once the momentum was gone, the combat strength of the soldiers would be weakened. The Flying Cloud Cavalry's shrewd response immediately negated the advantage of the Soaring Eagle Cavalry surprise attack. The 20 teams were instantly caught in a fierce battle. The war horses kept galloping and circling each other to test each other's strength. Volleys of arrows rained down on them. Occasionally, an unlucky cavalryman would fall off his horse, or a horse would fall after being shot in the eye. The cavalrymen of each team would shoot at each other from a distance to ensure that the war horses would gallop forward and not let the arrows land on them. Unless it was absolutely necessary, they would not engage in close-quarters combat. A close-quarters combat would result in both sides suffering great losses. Every single cavalryman was very precious. They would only choose to engage in close-quarters combat when they were at their wits' end and when they were at their wits' end. The side that had the upper hand would try their best to avoid such a situation. Shooting from afar was the essence of a light cavalry. As the Flying Cloud Cavalry and the Soaring Eagle Cavalry fought against each other, war horses or cavalrymen would fall off their horses from time to time. However, even though there were so many arrows shot out, only a few of them fell off their horses. Most of them were only injured. As they galloped forward, all of them had excellent horsemanship and were very good at dodging arrows. Yang Ping's expression was gloomy as he stood on a small hill and gazed into the distance. The sneak attack did not give him the upper hand. Instead, the Flying Cloud Cavalry had gained the upper hand. The cavalrymen of the Flying Cloud Cavalry were even more skilled. All of them dodged the arrows with ease and shot at them with their bows. In just a short while, the Soaring Eagle Cavalry had lost 20 cavalrymen, while the Flying Cloud Cavalry had only lost 5. If this went on, the Soaring Eagle Cavalry would be at an even greater disadvantage. It was obvious that they would lose this battle. He glanced at the mountainside 1.5 kilometers away. A large flag was fluttering there. It was the flag of the Flying Cloud Cavalry. Jiang Jinfu held onto the large flag as he stared at the battlefield in the distance. He wished that he could personally join the battle. The horses galloped forward and neighed incessantly. The cavalrymen on the horses were cursing loudly to boost their courage. Some of them had fallen to the ground and were wailing in pain. All sorts of noises were mixed together, and it was a chilling sight to behold. Chuli said gravely, "Faster, faster." He urged his warhorse to speed up, and they entered the forest at the foot of the mountain. "Change into your armor," Chuli ordered. Everyone dismounted from their horses and took off their original armors. Then they opened up their backpacks and changed into the armor of the Flying Cloud Cavalry. These were the armors of the Flying Cloud Cavalry who had been killed in the previous years. Chuli did not know if this would lower their guard and buy them some distance. The radiant armor was too eye-catching. From afar, anyone could tell that it was the soaring Eagle Cavalry, and it would be difficult for them to launch a surprise attack. "Wrap up the horseshoes," Chuli said. Everyone took out thick cotton cloths from their backpacks and wrapped the horseshoes. Then they leaped onto their horses and threw their original armors into the forest. Chapter 10:30. Yes, everyone was energized and rubbed their palms together. Chuli waved his hand and rode out of the forest. They took a small path at the foot of the mountain and circled around it. Soon, a vast grassland appeared in front of them. They galloped on their horses and soon arrived at the foot of another mountain. Chuli waved his hand and gestured for them to dismount. Then he tied their horses to a tree and carried their equipment with him. Then they followed Chuli up the mountain. Although they could not use their inner energy, they were still martial arts practitioners, and their bodies were much stronger than ordinary people. Moreover, they had been practicing pole standing these days, so their legs were more agile and they could walk on the mountain path effortlessly. After a while, they arrived at the mountainside. Chuli said in a low voice, "They're on the opposite side of the mountain. When I tell you to charge, charge according to the formation. Shoot the arrows in the first round, then put away the arrows. Don't use the shields. Just tie them to your back and use your blades." Everyone nodded. Chuli quickened his pace. General Zhu Wuji of Flying Cloud Cavalry sat on his horse. 100 men surrounded him and looked around vigilantly. Zhu Wuji pointed his horsewhip into the distance and laughed loudly. "Ha! So this is the famous soaring Eagle Cavalry? Ha! They're just useless people." He was thin and had a protruding mouth and cheeks, which made him look rather wretched. However, his voice was unusually loud, and his laughter echoed far and wide. A thin middle-aged man stood beside him and stroked his beard. "They learn from us, after all, so they don't have enough experience in battle formations. It's a shame that they almost succeeded in their sneak attack. What a shame! What a shame! Elder Jing, whose side are you on?" Zhu Wuji laughed. "If word of this gets out, you'll be charged with colluding with the enemy." The thin middle-aged man stroked his beard and laughed. "I'm just sorry that their plan wasn't thorough enough. It's such a pity and makes me feel uncomfortable." War horses galloped, horses neighed, and people screamed. Dust billowed and shrouded the battlefield of more than 2,000 people. It was a tragic sight. The fallen riders were trampled by the war horses. Their internal organs were unharmed due to their armor, but their limbs were broken. They wouldn't have taken advantage of the opportunity. Zhu Wuji curled his lips. "They're a bunch of useless people. Their reputation is all talk. General, it seems like we're missing a group of people." The thin, middle-aged man observed for a while and counted with his fingers. He frowned. "Why don't I see the Sharp Vigor Battalion? They are a surprise troop. We have to guard against them." "Ha! We wiped out the entire Sharp Vigor Battalion," Zhu Wuji said with a laugh. "They're just 2 or 3 weaklings. They're nothing to worry about. It's better to be careful," the scrawny middle-aged man said. "Yang Ping is able to reach such a high position at such a young age. We can't underestimate him. Don't you know what kind of trash Yang Ping is?" Zhu Wuji curled his lips and said disdainfully, "What an idiot. He's only relying on the fact that he has a good older sister as his concubine." "You do have some skills," the thin middle-aged man said with a smile. "Are you afraid that Elite Battalion will assassinate me?" "Huh." The scrawny middle-aged man looked around and said with a frown, "We have to be on guard. We only have 100 protectors. If more than 100 soldiers from the Sharp Vigor Battalion really come, I'm afraid. With the military flag here, no matter how powerful an expert is, he's just an ordinary person. How can he block the attack of my 100 guards? Zhu Wuji laughed heartily as he shook his head and said, Old Jing, you're being overly cautious. You're being overly suspicious. Perhaps that brat Yangping is doing this on purpose. The scrawny middle-aged man shook his head. Young Zheng, young Meng, go to the top of the mountain and be on guard. Don't miss even the slightest movement. Yes. The two sturdy protectors gave a fist salute and leaped off their horses. Then they walked up the mountain like two meteors. Soon, the two of them arrived at a huge rock at the top of the mountain and looked down. Chu Li and the others appeared in front of them. At first, they did not pay much attention to them because they were wearing the same armor as them, so they thought that they were on the same side. After a while, they realized that their own people should not have come at this time. So, they looked at each other and shouted, Who's there? This momentary delay was the reason why Chu Li had changed his armor. Because of this momentary delay, they were originally 200 meters away from Zhu Wuji and the others, but now they were only 100 meters away. There's really an assassin? Zhu Wuji laughed. Old Jing, you're right. The scrawny middle-aged man frowned and said, General, let's retreat. How many people? Zhu Wuji shouted. His voice was like a loud bell that traveled up the mountain. 23. Haha. 23 of them want to deal with me? They really don't know what death is. Zhu Wuji laughed. Kill them all. Old Jing, I'll leave them to you. Yes. Although the scrawny middle-aged man did not agree, he could only obey the general's order. He gave a fist salute and dismounted from his horse. Then, he strode out with 50 cavalrymen. Chu Li led the charge, followed by Su Zihong and Fan Yang. The three of them drew their long blades. Before they could see the scrawny middle-aged man, Chu Li shouted, Shoot! His inner energy was suppressed, but his omniscient mirror and manifestation of nature restoration were unhindered. He could clearly see Zhu Wuji and the scrawny middle-aged man's every move and even their thoughts. Zhu Wuji's carelessness was a good thing because they could make use of it. However, the scrawny middle-aged man's cautiousness was troublesome, so it was best to get rid of him first. Fortunately, Zhu Wuji was headstrong and did not listen to other people's advice. Therefore, the scrawny middle-aged man's words might not work. When they heard Chu Li shout, they did not hesitate to shoot arrows even though they did not see anyone. The arrows fell like rain. Just as they were about to hit the ground, the scrawny middle-aged man and his men rushed out from behind a huge rock and faced the rain of arrows. Ding, ding, ding. They quickly waved their circular blades to block the arrows and paused. While they paused, Chu Li and the others had already rushed over with their blades. Ding, 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 ding. Chu Li rushed at the front and swung his blade at lightning speed. Su Zihong and Fan Yang protected him from both sides as the three of them pierced into 50 men like a triangular wedge. Chu Li's body was strong. He could fight a grandmaster without using his inner energy, let alone these ordinary riders who could not withstand a single blow from his blade. The fact that they took the lead inspired the others. The 20 men stepped on the formation and spun forward like a chainsaw. Wherever they passed, scimitars were knocked away and bodies were cut. In the blink of an eye, they had pierced through 50 men, leaving only wounded people on the ground. Without hesitation, they rushed toward Zhu Wuji and his men. When the scrawny middle-aged man saw that the situation was bad, he rushed up the mountain and shot a signal into the sky. Boom! A thunderclap sounded in the sky. The flying Cloud cavalry, who were fighting fiercely under the yellow dust, immediately retreated. 500-man teams rushed toward General Zhu Wuji, while the remaining 5 teams stayed behind to interfere with the soaring Eagle cavalry. Although they were at a disadvantage, they were still able to hold them back. What's going on? Yang Ping looked into the distance and frowned when he saw someone charging toward Zhu Wuji. Since Chu Li and his men were wearing the armor of the flying Cloud cavalry and had covered their faces, they did not recognize Chu Li and his men. General, are they having an internal conflict? Jiang Jinfu was overjoyed. God is helping soaring Eagle cavalry. Yes, it's highly possible. Yang Ping nodded slowly. Pass down my order. Pursue them with all your might. No matter what, you must reach the Flying Cloud Cavalry's martial flag. Chapter 10:31. Jiang Jinfu hit the drum and suddenly shouted, General, it looks like the Sharp Vigor Battalion. When he saw the bright, circular blade gleam, he immediately recognized that it was the Sharp Vigor Battalion's formation. How dare they? Yang Ping's expression darkened. They're courting death. General, they're trying to kill Zhu Wuji. Jiang Jinfu shouted. Their formation is very powerful. Look, look, he cried out in surprise. Everyone widened their eyes and looked over. They realized that the 23 men were invincible. The 50 men tried their best to block them, but could not stop them. The blade gleam was like a chainsaw that cut through everything in its way and kept advancing. What a pity! Yang Ping shook his head. He saw Zhu Wuji quickly retreat with 10 men and gallop down the mountain. He estimated that they would soon join the 500 men. No matter how powerful 20 men were, they could not survive against 500 cavalrymen. Moreover, they could not do anything to the cavalrymen since they did not ride on horses. In just a short while, Zhu Wuji had already retreated far away and was out of danger. The assassination was considered a failure. Yang Ping felt slightly regretful, but also fortunate. He regretted that Chu Li could not kill Zhu Wuji and make a great contribution. The Sharp Vigor Battalion's contribution was also Soaring Eagle Cavalry's contribution. He was glad that Chu Li did not succeed. Otherwise, he would have been promoted to a centurion and left the Sharp Vigor Battalion. Sigh, we were so close. Jiang Jinfu stomped his foot. He was anxious for Chu Li and the others. At this time, he could not care less about personal grudges and kill Zhu Wuji first. Soaring Eagle Cavalry would have won a great victory and everyone would be rewarded. A battle of emotions was not as important as a contribution. Chu Li swung his blade and cut off one of the men's arms. His physical advantage was obvious here. Facing these cavalrymen was like an adult bullying a child. No one could block his blade. However, no matter how fast he swung his blade, these men were not afraid of death. They used their bodies to block his blade without hesitation and killed one by one. Sigh, we were so close. We were so close. Jiang Jinfu kept stomping his foot and wanted to help. Everyone was so anxious that they kept stomping their feet. It was a rare opportunity to be able to get so close, but they had almost succeeded. They had been so close. When Chu Li saw that Zhu Wuji had run 100 meters away and was getting further away, he disappeared in a flash and reappeared in front of Zhu Wuji's horse and swung his blade. Nay, the steed neighed and stood up, trying to avoid the blade. Although Zhu Wuji looked wretched on the horse, he was valiant and domineering. Without hesitation, he brandished his saber and charged forward. Chu Li disappeared again in a flash. His body was in midair, and he did not care about an arrow that was shot at him. He allowed it to shoot into his chest and swung his blade down. This saber strike was like a bolt of lightning, fast and fierce, pressing forward with an indomitable will. Rip! Zhu Wuji's head flew into the air. Chu Li staggered and landed on the ground. He lowered his head to look at the arrow that had pierced through his chest. He then raised his head to look at a middle-aged knight not far away. This middle-aged knight was controlling his horse and standing on top of a rock, looking down from above. His eyes were cold and emotionless. He knocked his bow again and shot an arrow. The tip of the arrow flashed with a strange red light, as if it was smeared with fresh blood. Chu Li was wearing armor and a floating silkworm treasured clothing underneath, which made him almost invulnerable. However, there was no such thing as invincible in this world. The floating silkworm treasured clothing was not indestructible, and this arrow had managed to break it. Swoosh! Another arrow was shot. Chu Li waved his blade lightly. Ding! The long arrow was easily cut down by his blade. Chu Li could not miss this fleeting opportunity to kill Zhu Wuji. Even though he had sensed that he should have dodged this arrow, he did not care. Otherwise, the middle-aged knight's arrow would not have hit him at all. He could have easily dodged it. The middle-aged knight's most dangerous weapon was the tip of the arrow. He stared coldly at the knight and shouted, "Retreat!" Su Zihong shouted, "Master Zhao, let's go." "You guys retreat first," Chu Li shouted. "I'll cover you." "Master Zhao, be careful," Fan Yang hurriedly said. "Let's go." Su Zihong glanced at Chu Li and retreated with Fan Yang and 20 men. After witnessing Chu Li killing people as if he was cutting a melon, they knew that they would only be a burden if they stayed. The best thing to do was to leave early so that they would not be a burden to him. The knights ignored Su Zihong and his men and charged at Chu Li like crazy. They charged at him recklessly and swore to kill him. The thin, middle-aged man stood at the top of the mountain and shouted, "Whoever can kill this guy will be rewarded with 10,000 taels of gold and promoted to a chiliarch." He stood tall, and his voice could be heard even if he did not use his inner energy. Apart from the loyal protectors, the 500 cavalrymen at the foot of the mountain charged at him in a frenzy. Chu Li picked up Zhu Wuji's severed head and wrapped it in a cloth bundle before running back. He desperately absorbed spiritual energy from all directions. Although it was suppressed, he could still use some of it. This bit of spiritual energy allowed him to use his light body technique and was as fast as a galloping horse. On this road in the forest, he could not run as fast as a galloping horse. Wherever he passed, anyone who stood in his way would be cut in half with a single slash of his blade. After a while, there was no one in front of him anymore. Only the people who were hot on his heels were shooting arrows at him. Chu Li waved his long blade and had a shield behind him. As long as the arrows did not hit his head, he could easily protect himself. Swoosh! He suddenly turned around and slashed with his blade. The middle-aged knight's arrow was cut down. Among the crowd, this arrow posed the greatest threat. The rest were not a concern. Even if the arrow could pierce through the shield, he still had the floating silkworm treasured clothing. Chu Li turned around and continued running. As he ran, he could feel his inner energy and strength flowing out along with the arrow in his chest. Although the speed was not fast, it was constantly flowing out. If this continued, he would soon become weak. Without hesitation, he swung his blade and cut off the tail of the arrow. Then he pressed down hard, causing the tip of the arrow to pierce through his back. Blood gushed out. The tip of the arrow was hooked, so it was easy to advance, but difficult to retreat. Once it was pulled out, the injury would be even more severe. Chu Li first tied the bundle that contained Zhu Wuji's severed head to his waist. Then, he took out a jade bottle from his inner pocket and poured out a snow-white pill before stuffing it into the bleeding wound. In just a short while, the bleeding stopped and a cold aura surged around the wound. Chu Li sighed to himself. Fortunately, he had prepared a high-grade spirit pill just in case. He did not think that he would need it, but he did not expect to use it so soon. He moved very quickly, and the distance between him and the arrows could no longer reach him. The cavalrymen of Flying Cloud Cavalry were in hot pursuit. When they saw the general's head dangling from Chu Li's waist, they were so furious that they were about to go crazy. They would not stop until they caught up to Chu Li and killed him. Buzz! The sound of a bull's horn could be heard. The scrawny middle-aged man stood at the top of the mountain and blew into the bull's horn. When the 500 men who were guarding the rear heard the sound of the bull's horn, they quickly turned around and charged toward Chu Li and the others to block their way down the mountain. There were 500 men chasing after them from behind, and another 500 men blocking their way in front. "Good," Yang Ping shouted and punched his palm as he said with hatred. "It's good that he died." It was supposed to be a great defeat since Soaring Eagle Cavalry was far inferior to Flying Cloud Cavalry. But now, they had achieved a great victory. Jiang Jinfu shouted joyfully, "Zhu Wuji is dead. Congratulations, General." Yang Ping scoffed. "Let's see how the battle goes first." Chapter 1032. P.S. Update complete. When he thought of this, his joy faded away and he was very unhappy. The 500 soldiers of Flying Cloud Cavalry were not in the mood to fight anymore. They fought as they moved to stop Chu Li and the others. Even so, the 800 soldiers of Soaring Eagle Cavalry could not do anything to them. Their archery skills were not as good. If they got too close, they would be shot dead. Even if they were too far away, they could not do anything to them. Soaring Eagle Cavalry's morale gradually dropped, so they became less aggressive in their pursuit. Chu Li ran as fast as a galloping horse and soon caught up with Su Zihong and the others. He laughed and said, "We've succeeded. Get on your horses and run east." "Aren't we going back?" Su Zihong asked. Chu Li shook his head. "The way back is blocked. Let's go down a mountain." "All right." Su Zihong laughed. "This was a great battle." "Great, it was really great." Fan Yang laughed. Everyone could not suppress their excitement. 20 men had accomplished something that 1,000 men could not. They had killed the general of Flying Cloud Cavalry. This was a rare feat. They rushed into the forest at the foot of the mountain and got on their horses. They changed their armors as they galloped to their original ones. Then they rushed toward another mountain. By the time the 400 soldiers caught up, they had already entered the mountain. They let go of their horses and disappeared. Once they entered the mountain, their inner energy recovered, and they moved faster without the suppression of the military flag. Chu Li used the omniscient mirror and the nature restoration manifestation to predict the future. With the two combined, he played hide-and-seek with the 400 soldiers. Occasionally, he would make some fake tracks to lead them astray. However, Flying Cloud Cavalry also had tracking experts who could keep up with them. However, with Chu Li's elusive light body technique and his incredibly powerful light blade, they succumbed to their hatred one by one and were silently killed by dozens of them. As time passed, their anger and excitement subsided. They became rational and valued their lives more. Gradually, they became fearful and did not dare to continue the chase. Soaring Eagle Cavalry set up camp and blocked the only way to the east gate. Flying Cloud Cavalry was a mile away. The two armies faced each other and waited for Chu Li and the others to appear. Once they appeared, Soaring Eagle Cavalry would come to their aid and Flying Cloud Cavalry would attack. It would be another fierce battle. Flying Cloud Cavalry would forever be humiliated if they could not kill Chu Li and the others. The entire Flying Cloud Cavalry was filled with grief and indignation, as if they would go crazy at any time. As the saying goes, an army with indignation is bound to win. Yang Ping was not confident. As time passed, the rest of the Flying Cloud Cavalry's troops returned. The 800 of them did not pale in comparison to Soaring Eagle Cavalry. Yang Ping knew that Soaring Eagle Cavalry would be defeated if a fight broke out, so he had no choice but to seek help for the Grand General. However, time continued to pass, and there was still no sign of Chu Li and the others. It was as if they had disappeared into the deep mountains far away. Everyone in Soaring Eagle Cavalry began to worry. If it were not for the fact that Flying Cloud Cavalry had not retreated, they would have concluded that Chu Li and the others were already dead. Yang Ping learned from Zhu Wuji's lesson and set up camp in the army. Inside the central tent, the centurions gathered together to discuss their next move. The great general had ordered them to withdraw their troops and return to the city. The Qiu dynasty was about to attack the city. The death of a general had completely enraged the Qiu dynasty's cavalrymen. The Qiu dynasty's great general of the north had issued an order to massacre everyone in the city once the city was breached. A war was about to break out. If they did not return to the city now, it was very likely that the Qiu dynasty's cavalrymen would attack them from the back, and they would not be able to return to the city. Although Chu Li and the other 23 men had contributed greatly, they could only leave them be for now. Hopefully, they would be able to return safely. The moon was at its zenith. Everyone was sitting in a circle in the depths of the forest. A bonfire was blazing, and the roasted meat on the rack was sizzling. The aroma of oil dripping onto the firewood filled the air. Under the illumination of the bonfire, everyone seemed to be in high spirits. They did not seem to be in a sorry state after being chased. Instead, they all looked relaxed. "We've finally shaken them off completely." Su Zihong sighed. "It wasn't easy at all." Chu Li nodded. "We can go back now." Huang Hu smiled. Master Zhao, can we leave the Sharp Vigor Battalion after we return? Chu Li shook his head. Huang Hu hurriedly asked, You can't. Chu Li replied, Your situation is even more dangerous. Why? Huang Hu was indignant. We've killed a general and a chiliarch. Isn't that a great contribution? Can't we leave the Sharp Vigor Battalion? Chu Li replied, I could be promoted to a centurion and leave the Sharp Vigor Battalion, but you guys aren't strong enough. After all, you have a lot of people. If you want to leave the Sharp Vigor Battalion, you'll need to perform a great contribution. I see. The others sighed helplessly. They knew that Chu Li was right. After all, they had only assisted in the assassination and did not attack Zhu Wuji. It was Chu Li who caught up with Zhu Wuji at the critical moment. Chu Li's ability to kill Zhu Wuji was mostly due to his own ability. Anyone else would not have been able to do it. Then we'll think of a way to perform another contribution. Su Daxing laughed. It's not a big deal. Chu Li shook his head. Su Daxing said, Master Zhao, we have the formation that you taught us. It'll be easy for us to perform a contribution. How can there be such a good thing? Chu Li shook his head. The Sharp Vigor Battalion hasn't been dispatched because the general doesn't want me to perform a contribution. He's worried that something will happen to me because I'm a disciple of the Holy Church of Light. However, once I'm promoted to a centurion and leave the Sharp Vigor Battalion, he won't have to worry anymore. Do you think he'll let all of you go together? Chu Li's words made everyone's faces turn gloomy. Su Zihong sighed. Yes, the Sharp Vigor Battalion usually goes out in groups of 3. They won't send all of them out at once. That's why it's impossible for all of you to leave the Sharp Vigor Battalion just because of your contribution. Master Zhao alone is enough. Fan Yang sighed. It's not just you. The two of us are the same. What should we do then? Huang Hu asked. Master Zhao, you won't just watch us die, right? Chu Li said, There's a way out, but it depends on whether you're willing to take it. What way? Please tell us, Master Zhao. Su Daxing quickly said, Master Zhao's way won't be bad. Chu Li pointed at the top of the mountain. There's a stockade village on this mountain. You can enter this stockade village to seek shelter. Their identities were sensitive, and they were all felons who had committed murder. If it were not for the fact that they would help him perform a meritorious deed, he would not have bothered with them. Good people did not live long, while bad people lived for thousands of years. None of them had died in this operation. They were indeed tough. Good idea, Su Zihong quickly said. Are we considered bandits now? Su Daxing shook his head. This is the Qiu dynasty's stockade village, isn't it? This group of people has committed many evil deeds. Let's go and get rid of them first. Chu Li said, If you don't want to become bandits, think of a way to enter the Qiu dynasty and live the rest of your lives in peace. Don't even think about going back to the Li dynasty. I'll say that you've all died in battle. Master Zhao, I still have a mother, Su Daxing quickly said. Chu Li frowned. You still want to take care of your mother until she dies? Yes. Su Daxing quickly nodded. Chu Li scoffed. You're already a prisoner on death row. You're dead. Master Zhao, Su Daxing quickly said, I only have a mother. I want to bring my mother over. Is that all right? It's a long journey. She's old and might not be able to hold on, Chu Li said. It's better to let your mother enjoy her life. Are you the only child in your family? I still have a big brother, Su Daxing said. Chu Li glanced at him without saying a word. Then, he turned to look at the others. Is there anything else you want to say? When the others saw his attitude, they knew that it was useless to say anything else, so they could only shake their heads. Chu Li scoffed. You've helped me perform a meritorious deed, and I've helped you to save your lives. It's a fair deal. Don't go to the Li dynasty anymore, or else you'll be in endless trouble. If you really can't take it anymore, tell Fan Yang and Su Zihong. They'll contact me. Yes. The others nodded. Hurry up and eat. Then, we'll go and destroy that stockade village, Chu Li said. Chapter 1033. In the middle of the night, they took action and quietly occupied the stockade village. Out of consideration for the future, they did not exterminate them immediately. They only killed the leader and left those who surrendered. There were more than 300 people in the stockade village, but more than 20 of them died. Chu Li stood beside a forest outside the stockade village as Su Tsihong and Fan Yang sent him off. The morning sun shone on the forest, and scattered shadows fell on them. Chu Li sized them up. Elder Fan, Elder Su, what are your plans? Do you want to spend the rest of your lives here, or go back? We want to go back. Su Tsihong sighed. Fan Yang said, we'll return to our roots. We'll be more comfortable in the Li dynasty. They knew that they would die if they joined the Sharp Vigor Battalion, but they wanted to live in the Li dynasty. Life was not going their way. If they could leave the Sharp Vigor Battalion, they would definitely not stay here. Chu Li took out 2 secret manuals and handed them over. There's a bone-shrinking secret skill here. You'll be able to change your appearance when you master it. He took out 2 jade tags and handed them over. You can come and see me with these tags. Su Tsihong and Fan Yang sighed in relief and fist saluted. They were grateful for Chu Li's thoughtfulness. It was not safe for them to change their appearance because grandmasters were too conspicuous. They were like white cranes in a flock of chickens. They could be seen and recognized at a glance. Sooner or later, their identities would be exposed, and they would be in big trouble. However, it would be different if they became Chu Li's subordinates. He was a disciple of the Holy Church of Light and a branch leader. As long as they joined the branch of the Holy Church of Light, they would not have to worry about the military's investigation. They could only live in peace under Chu Li's command. Otherwise, they would rather not go back and live in fear. All right, you can go back. Chu Li waved his hand and said, I'll probably be promoted to a centurion after I go back. I'll see if I can transfer you out of the Sharp Vigor Battalion to be my subordinates. If I succeed, you can go back. If not, you can stay here. Restrain them and kill them if they cause trouble. Don't let them get into trouble and drag you into it. Yes. The 2 fists saluted. Chu Li nodded and glided into the forest, disappearing before their eyes. As the sun set, the siege came to a halt. The area outside Falling Autumn City was filled with the stench of blood. There was no one outside the city, but the moans of the injured soldiers lingered in Yang Ping's ears. Yang Ping's expression was ugly as he walked along the city wall with a few protectors. Soaring Eagle Cavalry was responsible for the defense of the East City Gate and the East City Wall. He leaned on the city wall and looked down at the vast land outside the city. The twilight was rising, and they couldn't see too far. However, they could see the blood on the ground, the broken siege weapons, the blood-stained round stones, the broken armor and arrows. The dead had been dragged away to be cremated to prevent the plague from spreading. Sigh. Yang Ping shook his head and sighed. The siege of the city was too cruel, and Soaring Eagle Cavalry had lost another 50 men during the day. Even though a batch of 400 men had been recruited from other places, these men were new soldiers who had never been involved in a battle. No matter how well they were trained, they would not be of much use to them. Soaring Eagle Cavalry's strength seemed to have increased, but that was not the case. General, look! Who's that? Jiang Jinfu suddenly shouted. Yang Ping looked over and saw a man walking out of the twilight. He was walking slowly towards the east gate. He saw that the man was Zhao Dai, and there was a bundle hanging on his waist. Yang Ping knew that it must be Zhu Wuji's severed head. Chu Li suddenly stopped and turned to look at the 3 men who were charging toward him. Monk Xishan's red cowl fluttered as he glided toward Chu Li with 2 other elders and surrounded him. Chu Li frowned and said coldly, Xishan, I was just about to settle the score with you. The tall and burly monk Xishan bowed with pressed palms. Namo Amitba, his Buddhist chant spread far and wide. The martial arts masters in the city could vaguely hear the commotion, but they ignored it. They hated Monk Xishan to the core, but there was nothing they could do. Fortunately, there was a military camp set up in the city. With the suppression of the military formation, the martial arts masters would only have 10 to 20% of their martial arts power left. The difference between them and ordinary soldiers was very small, and a few soldiers were enough to suppress the martial arts masters. With that, Monk Xishan dare not come again. Chu Li looked at the other 2 elders, one with a blade and the other with a sword. Are you from Haizong Mountain and Royal Blade Palace? Chu Li asked slowly. That's right, Zhao Dei. We were just about to settle the score with you. The elder with the blade said. You owe us a life. Same here, the elder from Hai Tsong Mountain said. Chu Li shook his head. You can't stop me. We'll see. The elder from Hai Tsong Mountain sneered. You took our treasure swords, didn't you? Chu Li's face darkened as he thought of Li Ruolin. Back then, the two of them had obtained 2 treasure swords. One was for himself, and the other was given to Li Ruolin. The treasure swords were still there, but they were gone. He glanced at Monk Xishan and swung his arm. Ding! A lunar chakram appeared in Monk Xishan's sleeve and blocked the light blade. Chu Li appeared dozens of meters away in a flash. His time steps were superb, and the people on the city wall were amazed. Monk Xishan disappeared in a flash and reappeared in front of Chu Li, slapping him with his palm. The elders from Royal Blade Palace and Haitsong Mountain attacked at the same time. Their swords were as fast as lightning, and their blades were as fast as lightning. He wanted to go to the east gate, but Monk Xishan blocked his way, causing him to move further and further away from the east gate. The crowd was anxious, but they dared not go down. Once they were out of the city, they would no longer be under the pressure of the military formation. They were no match for Monk Xishan, and they were afraid of him. They knew that they could not help and would only get themselves killed. Chu Li suddenly went up to Monk Xishan, and their palms collided. Boom! A loud sound was heard when their palms collided. When their palms touched each other, their palm energy changed constantly. It was hard to defend against it. Monk Xishan looked at Chu Li in surprise. He did not expect Chu Li's palm energy to be on par with his. It was obvious that Chu Li had mastered the Earth Matrix and reincarnation scripture and had a deeper understanding of it. This was a great threat to him. When he thought of this, his killing intent soared, and he stopped probing. Swoosh! A solar chakram appeared, and a white light shot toward Chu Li. Chu Li tilted his body, and at the same time, a flying blade shot out. The white light brushed past Chu Li, but the flying blade shot into Monk Xishan's sleeve and hit his wrist. Chu Li's nature restoration manifestation had improved greatly on the battlefield. He could not tell if it was because of the killing intent or the military flag, but he had improved by leaps and bounds. His analysis and prediction skills had improved greatly. He had already predicted Monk Xishan's movements, and he had prepared and responded in advance. Chu Li suddenly slashed at the elder from Haitsong Mountain at lightning speed. The elder swung his sword to meet it, but Chu Li's blade force suddenly changed from fierce to gentle. It slid along the blade to the hilt, and the elder was so frightened that he quickly retreated. Monk Xishan's face turned gloomy. He had never been so seriously injured, and he could not use his left hand, so it was difficult for him to deal with Chu Li's flying blade. His killing intent soared. It would be terrifying for such a powerful person to grow. It had not been a long time since they last met, but he had improved so much that it was shocking. The two of them were enemies, and Zhao Dei would definitely avenge Li Ruolin. There was no possibility of reconciliation, so he had to kill him before he became too powerful. Chu Li suddenly disappeared from the spot and reappeared 200 feet away, closer to the east gate. As soon as he appeared, he shot out a blade, followed by 2 blades. Monk Xishan appeared at the same time, and he quickly used his lunar chakram to deflect them. The other 2 blades appeared almost at the same time. Since he could not move his left hand, he could only dodge them while using his other hand to block them. Chu Li disappeared again in a flash, and he was now closer to the east gate. Monk Xishan disappeared in a flash. As soon as he appeared, 2 flying blades shot toward him at the same time. He could only dodge one and block the other. 2 more flying blades shot toward him, not giving him a chance to catch his breath. Chu Li suddenly disappeared, and he broke away from the blade and sword. However, Monk Xishan could not disappear, or else he would not be able to dodge the flying blades. The faces of the 2 elders from Haitsong Mountain and Royal Blade Palace turned red, and they moved faster. Chapter 1034. Chu Li's martial arts had improved tremendously. He had refined the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture and Inner Force Cultivation in Inyan Cave. Although the scripture was still not as good as Monk Ji Shan's, his inner energy was not inferior to his. However, the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture was mysterious and unpredictable. Even if his inner energy was equal, he was no match for him. This time on the battlefield, his nature restoration manifestation had improved tremendously. Even without the help of the omniscient mirror, he could still predict Monk Ji Shan's thoughts and attack before he could. Monk Ji Shan felt restrained, as if all his moves were seen through by his opponent. Zhao Dea was getting stronger and stronger. If this went on, he could really kill him. His killing intent surged, and he suddenly appeared beside Chu Li, wanting to ambush him. As soon as he appeared, 3 flying blades were already waiting in front of him, sealing off all his escape routes. He could block one with his right hand and dodge another with his body movement technique, but he could not dodge the other flying blade no matter what. If his left hand was not injured, he could use the sun chakram to block the blade. However, his left wrist was injured and he could not wield the sun chakram. He suddenly extended his left palm to block the flying blade. His inner energy circulated in his left palm. TSS. The flying blade pierced through Monk Ji Shan's left palm. His inner energy could not stop it, so it shot toward his left shoulder. Although his left palm could not block the flying blade, it slowed it down a little. It was at this moment that he managed to avoid being stabbed in the heart. Monk Ji Shan's expression did not change. The sun chakram in his right palm shot out a white light. Chu Li disappeared just in time to avoid the white light. The next moment, he appeared behind the Hai Tsong Mountain Elder. He pressed his right palm down and swung a blade with his left hand. The Royal Blade Palace Elder raised his blade to help. Ding! Chu Li's palm was blocked by the blade and let out a clear ringing sound. The Royal Blade Palace Elder's expression changed. He did not expect Chu Li's inner energy to be so pure and his palm energy to be so strong. Bang! The blade hit the Hai Tsong Mountain Elder's back, and he staggered. Chu Li's flying blade arrived just in time. The Hai Tsong Mountain Elder had not stabilized himself and could not dodge. The flying blade pierced his back and exited his chest, causing blood to spurt out. The Hai Tsong Mountain Elder did not turn to look. He sped up and ran more than 10 meters in an arc. When he turned to look again, Chu Li was already engaged in battle with the Royal Blade Palace Elder. At this time, the soldiers on the city wall hurried to call for the martial arts masters. Martial arts masters would almost never go up to the city walls. They had a weak advantage, and a single arrow could take their lives. That would be a real injustice. Monk Ji Shan shot out a ray of white light with his solar chakram. Chu Li evaded it as soon as he disappeared, and the white light shot toward the elder from Royal Blade Palace who was behind him. The elder from Royal Blade Palace hurriedly twisted his body to evade the attack. However, Chu Li appeared behind him and shot out flying blade for both hands. Chi. The old man from the Royal Blade Palace only managed to dodge one of the sabers before his right shoulder was pierced by the flying saber. "Let's go," he shouted. He turned around and ran with the Hai Tsong Mountain Elder. They had initially thought that the 3 of them would be able to kill Chu Li and avenge Flying Cloud Cavalry's Zhu Wuji if they worked together. However, they did not expect Chu Li to be so difficult to deal with. Monk Ji Shan's face darkened. His usual calm and carefree demeanor was nowhere to be seen. He turned around and left. Chu Li scoffed and appeared beside him in a flash. Both his blades shot out at the same time. Monk Ji Shan shifted his body horizontally and pressed his palms together. He wore a faint smile on his face. Almsgiver Zhao's martial arts has improved tremendously. Congratulations. Monk Ji Shan shifted his body horizontally and barely avoided the 2 blades. Then, he vanished without a trace. Chu Li's omniscient mirror had seen through his figure. Monk Ji Shan had vanished like a gust of wind. His speed had suddenly increased tremendously as he had activated his secret skill. He scoffed coldly. He was going to avenge Li Ruolin today by killing Monk Ji Shan. Just as he was about to activate his secret skill to chase after Monk Ji-shan, he noticed that two monks had appeared not far away from Monk Ji-shan with their palms pressed together. They were surrounded by a strange aura that blocked Chu Li's omniscient mirror's prying eyes. Their cultivation levels were only slightly lower than Monk Ji-shan's, but they were all rare martial arts masters. Chu Li sighed helplessly. He had lost his chance. He would have to wait until the future to take revenge. His cultivation level was not high enough yet. If his cultivation level was high enough, it would be a piece of cake for him to kill Monk Ji-shan. He would not be able to escape then. Bravo! The martial arts masters who had rushed up the city wall cheered loudly. This was the first time they had seen Monk Ji-shan at a disadvantage. Bravo! The soldiers cheered as well. Chu Li had single-handedly defeated Monk Ji-shan and the other two and forced them to flee in panic. They felt exhilarated and elated at the same time. Chu Li seemed to have heard the crowd cheering as he gave them a fist salute. Then, he sped up and soon arrived at the eastern gate. General, Jiang Jinfu turned to look at Yang Ping and asked in a low voice, "Should we open the gate?" It was wartime, and the gate should not be opened at will to avoid falling into the enemy's trap. It was easy to open the gate, but difficult to close it. Therefore, it was understandable that they did not open the gate. No one could say anything wrong. Yang Ping stared at Chu Li's figure. The dusk was getting darker, and Chu Li's figure looked particularly lonely in the twilight. "Open the gate and bring him here." Yang Ping scoffed. Jiang Jinfu stared at Chu Li. He felt indignant, but did not show it. "Yes, I'll order the gate to be opened immediately." Yang Ping glanced at him. "Don't mess around at a time like this." He knew what his trusted scribe was thinking. He was afraid that Jiang Jinfu would mess around at this juncture and lose the trust of the people. "Yes." Jiang Jinfu quickly nodded. Yang Ping took out a military order from his sleeve. Jiang Jinfu took the military order with both hands and hurriedly looked for the gate officer to open the eastern gate. By the time the eastern gate creaked open, Chu Li had already arrived. The soldiers and martial arts masters on the city wall stared at him. They felt that his ugly appearance made him look particularly heroic. Chu Li saw the bloodstains around him and knew that the siege had begun. His expression became more serious. He looked up at the people on the city wall and fist saluted. He strode through the gate and said to Jiang Jinfu, "I want to see the general." Jiang Jinfu said coldly, "Come with me." The two of them walked along the main street in silence. Chu Li felt that something was wrong in the city. His inner energy had been suppressed again. Martial arts masters no longer had an advantage in the city and were only slightly stronger than ordinary people. The atmosphere in the city was oppressive. The main street was bleak and the surrounding shops were closed. The bustling city had completely disappeared. Rumble. The ground shook. Amidst the flying dust, a group of cavalrymen rushed forward like a gust of wind. Neigh! The horses neighed incessantly as 11 fine horses reared up. The 10 knights sat firmly on their horses, each of them wearing a cold expression. The leading cavalryman fist saluted. "Are you Zhao De from the Soaring Eagle Cavalry's Sharp Vigor Battalion?" Chu Li fist saluted. "Yes, I am. The Grand General wants to see you. Come with me," the cavalryman said. Chu Li said, "Allow me to greet the general first, then the Grand General." The cavalryman shook his head. "The Grand General wants to see you soon. It won't be too late to meet General Yang when you're back. Let's go." One of the cavalrymen dismounted and pulled an empty fine horse over. He stuffed the reins into Chu Li's hands. "The Grand General wants to see you. Hurry up." Chu Li looked at Jiang Jinfu helplessly. Jiang Jinfu said, "I'll report this to the general. You should go and see the Grand General first." He had no other choice but to say this under such circumstances. He scoffed himself. This Zhao De looked ugly and bad-tempered, but he had a shrewd side. He did not reveal anything and did not give anyone any information. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.